example, Alexander the Great, he moved east with his armies because he had heard stories that Hercules had gone all the way to India. Does it mean that a real Hercules actually went to India? Probably not, but it inspired him to go conquer all these territories and make himself a grand figure of history is the myth. You have to create the myth, but the myth can change. The myth can be malleable, but the ultimate form stays the same, which is an affirmation of beauty, an affirmation of power, and progress, not in the sense of equality, but honestly, let's have more inequality. Because inequality is where difference comes from. Beauty comes from inequality. Something is only beautiful in opposition to a dialectic of what is ugly. Right?
100%. That's all the great stories are someone who a lot of the time has nothing and they're trying to achieve greatness, they're trying to become this different version. That's most great stories. Even Hercules is that,
So this podcast was recorded last Sunday before the events of September 10th with the political assassination of Charlie Kirk taking place. So we discussed the slaying of the Ukrainian refugee Iryna on a Charlotte train in North Carolina, but we did not discuss the assassination of Charlie Kirk as it had yet to occur. So I just want to say some words about that. And obviously, I personally had a lot of disagreements with Charlie Kirk. I actually attended one of his events last year in October and asked him a question. And it doesn't matter that we disagreed with him. And like I said, there were many disagreements, but that doesn't matter anymore. There was a great post I saw that essentially said, Iryna could have been your wife, your daughter, your sister, your mother, but Charlie Kirk was us. And I also saw another post that said, Charlie Kirk was killed for the political positions that he did not hold himself, but that we, who are more radical, hold. He was a moderate. He was not a radical. So if they're willing to kill a moderate, what would they do to us? And that is precisely what should be accounted for in this instance, and why we have to all come together and condemn this act and respond in turn with the full support behind him and the full support together as one united cohesive force. So those are just some things I wanted to say. There's a lot going on in relation to this, a lot that I am trying to do myself, which I'll be keeping you all tuned on, but I just wanted to say those messages before you watch this podcast. Thank you. So let's say Legionaries. I have a very special guest today coming far away from the ancient land of Ireland. A very special guest. If you're on Twitter, you've probably seen a lot of his videos that are sort of delving into both the Irish immigration crisis and then, of course, the wider things going on in Europe. Recently, you got a reply from Elon Musk. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. He's a fan. No.
You got to ask him for some money now.
I was thinking, how much can I get away with? But
it's $1 million. That's nothing to him, right?
Yeah. Give me $1 million, please. I beg.
Why not? But yeah, well, welcome to the show, Michael. And then obviously for the Legionaries, the Legionaries come from all around the world. So for the Legionaries not familiar with your stuff, if you could just briefly introduce yourself and sort of tell them about the stuff that you do online.
Yeah, 100%. So I just started making content last year, and all I do is make videos. So a lot of the videos, I was thinking of today, I was going to write a post about it. A lot of it is just taking content I see on X that is in written format, and I'll just throw it into a video and make it more digestible for people. I throw that on Instagram, threw it on TikTok as well, but got banned from there early on. So now it's just Instagram and X mainly. But yeah, basically just making video content. That's basically it. Yeah.
There we go. I saw your podcast with, I forget the name of the guy, but Uber Boy was on it. And there was somebody else on it.
Hobbs.
That's the guy. Yeah. And you have a YouTube channel too, but I guess you probably X is more of your priority right now.
It is. Yeah. I'm trying to get into YouTube. I'm trying to get into long form content, but I'm trying to figure out what format. to do, because I want a format that I can pump out a video maybe every 3 days, and it's good, it's high quality, and it's interesting, where you just take maybe an event like what happened yesterday, the video that came out yesterday with the Ukrainian girl, and you can do like a 5 to 10 minute video on that for YouTube, break it down, give everyone's reactions that are happening on X, and just kind of make it digestible, make it easy for people. But I'm still figuring it out.
For sure. And, maybe let's touch up on that really quick. So obviously there was, I believe she was a Ukrainian refugee who moved around the beginning of the war.
Yeah, Ukraine. So she went to, is it Charlotte in America? And just was, I think she was either finishing work at a pizzeria or going to it, but she had her uniform on, sat down, minding her own business, looking at her phone, and unprovoked, and in a very aggressive manner, black guy who was in and out of jail 14 times.
Yeah, he had 15 mugshots lined up next to each other. It was insane. He just kept letting him out. Yeah,
kept letting him out. And he just stabs her in the neck. Absolutely brutal. And and the big surprise is everyone knows about it because of X, but you look at all the big mainstream publications, nobody's talking about it, which is wild.
Yeah, that's sort of like a recurring theme as well. Even when the Carmelo Anthony situation was taking place, I don't remember a single major news agency that was covering that. But they covered Shiloh Hendricks, but they didn't cover Carmelo Anthony. So 100%. It's like
it's the same with Daniel Penny. Like everyone knew about Daniel Penny. Was it last year it happened?
It was early 2024, I believe.
Was it? Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, everyone knew about him. And he restrained Jordan P. Neely, is it? Jordan Neely is his name?
Yeah, Jordan Peele's the
comedian dude. Yeah. God damn it. Yeah. So Jordan Neely, and he restrained him. He was acting aggressive. There was outrage. Like, there was people protesting on the subways, all this kind of stuff. And this is completely unprovoked. She seemed like a very sweet girl, completely innocent, and stabbed in a brutal way. Nothing, there's no protest. There's no,
And what's crazy about that is if you look in the video, you see him slowly opening his switchblade. It's like there's like a 30-second time where it's not like just this, he does it right away. Like he's thinking about it. It's crazy. And on top of that, aside from the brutality and evil of it, the fact that he would just do that, knowing there's a camera right there, knowing there's people around, like what is going through his head? It's absolutely insane.
It is.
But on the topic of, you mentioned Daniel Penny, for instance, and people say, well, why aren't people stepping in to save people? And then you see what happened with Penny. And, he was in the Marine Corps for, I think, 4 years. I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years. So I have a special affinity with him as well. And you're taught, in the military, especially the Marine Corps. I don't really consider the other branches part of the U.S. military anymore because they're all soft. But the Marines, they're taught to step in. The Marine Corps is the backbone of America. Maybe the Army, but you're taught to, obviously, it's citizen service. You're supposed to not just after you get out, you're supposed to carry on that sort of ethic. And what does he get for it? Right? He gets demonized. 100%. This guy's parents, Jordan Neely or whatever, nowhere when he was homeless for 10, 20 years. But all of a sudden, when they think they can get a payday out of the killing, out of the woodwork they come. So it
is brutal. We used to be a society, a nation who would honor people like that, who would do the right thing, who would step in, because that's the more difficult part. It's easy to stand back and watch things happen and not get involved. It's a lot harder to put yourself forward in harm's way and try to help or defend other people. And we're vilifying that, but rewarding the opposite of just being passive, let things happen, which is terrible.
Yeah, and even talking about rewarding, Carmelo Anthony got, I believe, a total of $1.4 million. And so I think you might have posted this. It might have been someone else posted so far. This young woman, her, I guess it would be maybe funeral expenses or for her family, it was like $40,000. And there's just great animus from from, a lot of it's like the Black community in the case of Carmel Anthony, or in Europe, I guess it'd be more so, African rather than Black. Obviously, it's a little bit of a different identity, but there's so much animus and this anger, right? And in Ireland, I've seen a few videos as well, and maybe you can touch up on that. Like, do you witness that, whether in person or just sort of observing the news there?
About anger towards certain people, is that?
Yeah, I guess in Europe, obviously, in Ireland, the native Irish people, right, are getting, there's this. It's funny because all these people are coming over to Europe, and I'm repeating stuff that we all talk about, but you're coming to this country which is obviously better than the country you've left, and nevertheless there's this, especially the Irish have never, first of all, I don't agree with the whole argument of, oh, if you colonized at one time you deserve revenge. I don't agree with that. But even if you said that, the Irish have never had any colonies, right? So like, where's the anger coming from?
Exactly. They get away with saying that with England and France and Belgium, all these other places. With Ireland, they don't get away with that. With Ireland, and this is the funny thing, and people call it out the whole time. With Ireland, it's you went places. Because the Irish emigrated, now you have to have open borders. That's their kind of new thing. Well, in England, they go, oh, you colonized half the world. Same with France. You were in Africa. You deserve this, as if it's a punishment for what you did in your past. With Ireland, it's just, there's Irish in abroad. It's like, okay, yeah. So it just open your borders and take as many Africans as possible. It's like, oh, come on, guys. Nonsense.
And on top of that, you'd think, for example, obviously the original great immigration that came out of Ireland was, obviously there's a lot of unnatural, explanations with the English occupation, but thinking, okay, well, this country no longer has enough to sustain its own people, so they have to leave. But then, okay, you can't sustain your own people, but let's have more people coming in. Obviously, it sort of doesn't really make a lot of sense. And actually, this is a perfect segue into the housing crisis that's going on in Ireland, because that's kind of the same thing. So maybe you could touch up on that, because you're there. Like, what's it like right now?
It's terrible. A lot of people. We have one of the lowest home ownership rates in Europe. I was watching a video the last day. What did it say? I think it was pricing up houses or rent, it could be. And Ireland has one of the highest rent rates, So people can't leave. A lot of 30, 35-year-olds are still at home. And you can't you can't have a start at life until you can own your own little 4 walls and a roof, your own shelter. And I think and it ties into birth rates and everything. If you could, if Irish people had that opportunity and they could own a house, they could own a bit of shelter, they're more likely to fill it up, get married, have kids, fill it up. But of course, if you're renting, if you have that pressure over you, if you're at home with the parents, like, there's no hope of having children. It wouldn't make sense. It ties into everything, this housing crisis. And then we have our politicians saying, which is ludicrous. It always makes me laugh. Immigration doesn't affect housing. It's like, okay, all right. Yeah, mad. That shocks me every time.
And who's mainly pushing this rhetoric? Because obviously, traditionally people would consider Sinn Féin to be the leftist element. But even with Sinn Féin, I looked at, I brought this up on my Uber Boyo podcast. I saw this poll taken, and 70% of the Sinn Féin voters actually said they wanted less immigration. So which parties, is it every party that's sort of, pushing this narrative of relatively open immigration?
Yeah, it's a bit strange. Like, you look, obviously there's a few parties in Ireland that are starting up, nationalist parties. They wouldn't be pushing immigration. But the main ones, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn Féin, they're the big three. They are very pro-immigration. There's no indication that they're at all against it. And Sinn Féin you'll hear people chant a lot of the time, Sinn Féin are traitors, because Sinn Féin are supposed to be nationalist in a way. They're supposed to be for the Irish people. But their leader, Mary Lou, you'll see her hanging out with, Muslim communities. She's pro-immigration, very liberal. So it's kind of going against going against what people's view of that party should be, which should be nationalist. It should be for Irish people. But it seems to be the opposite. They're more liberal a lot of the time than Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, I would say.
And speaking of those sort of emerging parties, in Ireland, it seems sort of as you've stated the major ones, that those three parties seem to have largely an unchallenged, let's say, monopoly over the political system. Are there any emerging parties that actually have some traction, or is it still very grassroots, hardly any influence yet?
Yeah, independents have been growing, but it is very much grassroots. There's a few in Ireland, but it's kind of like the right the right in Ireland is very fractured, which I didn't coming into this. I had no interest in politics. It wasn't my scene. So when I got into this, I assumed that those on the right would be one big group and they'd be quite together. But for anyone that is in the scene and knows of it, they'll know that it is very fractured. The right have a lot of grievances against each other and a lot of old, I don't know how you'd say it, just anger or things that happened, and they butt heads a lot, which is a shame to see. But I suppose the biggest party with the most potential right now would be the National Party. I'd say they'd have the most potential.
And what's sort of the I guess the trajectory? Because like I said, I've sort of heard about some of these emerging parties. I see a video here and there, but in terms of when they were formed, what sort of popular support do they have? Like, is the National Party, like, how early is it in the trajectory towards eventually potentially, getting parliament success?
Yeah, I would hope they'd get a TD in the next election. You'd hope a few, but it depends on the candidates. But I can see them, I would hope, getting a TD in the next election. But these people are completely shunned from with the media. Like, they'll never get the chance to be put in front of RTE, which is our state broadcaster, or another one like Virgin Media. They'll never have any of these people on, which is a shame, because most people won't get to see them. But we're lucky with social media, X, Instagram now, that we can kind of start pushing these people. But in terms of mainstream support, it's going to be very hard to garner.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the topic of social media, I feel more people probably watch podcasts now than mainstream news. Even back in the States with Fox News, obviously Tucker Carlson was booted off of Fox News, but I feel like more people watch Tucker Carlson's podcast now than they actually watch these Fox 100%. News segments. So independent media. I mean, hopefully, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that? Because I'm not really sure what the big Irish podcasts are. Obviously, like I'm friends with Uber Boyo, so I watch his stuff. I saw the podcast you did. Who are there any like big podcasters in Ireland? Alternate media?
I wouldn't say so. No, I'm not. People always go, "Do you know this person? Do you know that person?" I'm like, no, I don't know many people. I don't know many people. I keep in my own lane. I just try to ignore everything else and just put out videos. But in terms of podcasts in Ireland, Eddie Hobbs is doing a good job. Eddie Hobbs is starting. He's doing well. There's a new studio up in Dublin, which is supposed to put out more content and kind of move towards kind of a news channel style thing, which would be good to see. There's Script Media, which was, I think it was started maybe 4 years ago, which has been a welcome addition to Ireland. When Grip Media started, it had huge traction. It still has huge traction because there's a void there, and that's why I started last year. There is a void all across Europe for just people saying views that lean right. That's it, really. You look at America, you have Turning Point, you have Daily Wire, you have lots of different Rift News, another one. There's so many out there for any type of view you might have. Ireland, if you're not liberal, you're almost shunned. So it's starting to happen now where you're going to have people pop up and different channels pop up. So it's an interesting time.
Maybe that's your opportunity, right? You're trying to figure out what to do on YouTube. You could be the Irish, I don't want to say dissident right, because of course the goal is to become mainstream eventually, but beginning with the dissident, sort of getting that thing. That could be you. You could be the Irish podcaster, leading the front, being the vanguard of the future, right?
That's it, yeah. But it's there for anyone's taken. I would say if anyone came out now in Ireland and started just saying common sense things, like something as simple as men who wear a dress aren't, they're not women. Something as simple as that, and everyone would be like, wow, that's incredible, that's what I think, and they don't hear these views being voiced in Ireland. So you're going to garner support, and people are going to be like, finally, someone in Ireland, you can put a face to it, is saying what I think.
Yeah, and sort of going into that, and we're talking about Ireland, but you mentioned, of course, the EU as a whole. And recently they had the Remigration rally. I believe it was in Vienna. I believe that was July 26th, I want to say, or something like that. No, maybe it was earlier. But there's this youth kind of thing. Maybe you have some thoughts on that. Like youth, there's revival.
There is, that Remigration conference. That was the first, wasn't it? It was called, what's the name of it? Something
I can't remember.
25. I can't either. Something 25. It's probably like REM 25 or something. But yeah, it's exciting. I was going to say it the last day. I was going to make a video. It's an exciting time in Europe at the moment, because you're starting to see a lot of European creators just appear saying the same message, all one big group saying Europe's changing, not in a good way, and we need to reverse what's happening. We need to fix the problems we see. And one of the big things that are being pushed now, and I think Eva Flair is pushing this as well. They call it generation remigration. There's loads of people. Martin Sellner's another one. And they're just pushing this idea of remigration. And you start to see people getting on board with it there. It's not a bad thing. It should be embraced, I think. And it's becoming more mainstream. It's becoming way more mainstream now.
And even AFD, I think they're polling at what, 35% right now? Because their election, how soon is that? Is that in the next month? I know it's coming up.
Yeah, coming weeks, yeah.
And at this point, Germany's probably getting one of the worst. I mean, obviously, I would say Germany, France, sure. UK, probably like the top three biggest issues. And at this point, AFD is the moderate option. Besides so obviously you have the woman who's in charge, and she's like lesbian, and she has a Sri Lankan wife, but you also have this other guy, you might have mentioned him, what was his name again? What I'm talking about? He's like more of the
I don't know. I know Alice Wardell. Is that the girl you're talking about? I don't know the guy.
I think so. There's let me look it up.
Yeah, an
AFD he's kind of the more I guess legit manifestation of the AFD. Is like, I'm trying to remember his name. Oh, there we go. I have his picture up right now. I just got Bjorn Hawk. That's his name. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Yeah. He's kind of, I guess, the more nationalist, like less moderate. Because there was a funny thing in the European right where different right-wing parties were avoiding association with the more right wing. So, for example, I believe it was AFD was pushing away from their radical element. Le Pen's National Rally felt that the AFD was too extreme, and then somebody else felt like National Rally was too extreme. So it's kind of funny that this is really the moderate option when you think about it. To me, it's not like the majority of AFD is not even an extreme option. This is the moderate response to the craziness that's been going on there.
100%. It's not that like. The problem is when people talk about the issues and all that, it's like what's the solution? And a lot of them don't have a solution. This is where reform ruined themselves. Nigel Farage was asked, I think a few months ago, so what's the plan? And he goes, mass deportations aren't an option. And it's like, what do you mean it's not an option? So we're just going to accept what happened and let it just kind of continue. The people, and that kind of ruined reform. Straight away, everyone realized this isn't our guy. You need someone brave enough to say, right, the issue is there's millions of people in Europe that shouldn't be in Europe. They're worsening the quality of life for everyone. They're much better off being sent back to their own country, because all they're doing is ruining it for everyone here. And people are on board with that now. Like a year ago, they might have been a bit a touchy subject. Now I see everyone posting about remigration. It seems to just be mainstream.
Yeah, and especially with all these, with all these publicized stories too. I think that, you know, largely these instances of violence have, you know, generally been kept away from, like you mentioned, the mainstream media. But with X now, you see an implosion of like all these videos coming out, individual instances. 100%. You saw like the Scottish girl with like the axe and the knife. They're making edits to that. And the funny thing, even with that story, even the mainstream media was trying to twist that. And this is a guy whose name is very much not a Bulgarian name. I forget his exact name, but they're trying to say, oh, he's Bulgarian, right? Yeah. If you look into this guy, his name was not Bulgarian at all. I think he considers himself a gypsy. So it's funny how the mainstream media is sort of, they're very complicit in this.
100%. And when that happened, this is the shocking part. When that went out, there was a whole side. So on X, you'll have the people that are common sense, I would call them. The other side were saying, oh, the girl's, she's 12, keep in mind, 12, 14. She's a thug, you know? She's bad parents, just vilifying this girl and trying to make your man seem like this innocent bystander, and this 12-year-old was this, you know, ravaged monster out to kill everyone. But it then came out a week later that your man was arrested. So the guy who was videoing it, for, I think I'll have a look at it, but I don't know what crimes he committed. But he was actually arrested. Scottish girl.
He attacked that girl's friend, I believe. It was something like that.
Is that why he was arrested? Yeah, so all those people that came out, man and woman charged after girl's weapons arrest. Yeah, okay.
And I think another funny thing is, you know, on the topic, you know, there's this post or something. I think it was some woman who posted it, and she said, "This is what happens when men don't stand up for women," or something like that. But it's hilarious, because if you look at the nature of immigration, who's supporting mass immigration on a low level scale? Obviously, it's a lot of the liberal women or whatever, and you see the values, especially of especially of the Islamic migrants coming in, and this doesn't add up. You want more rights, you want to be treated with dignity, but then you want to import a specific worldview that is diametrically opposed to yours. And I tell women this all the time, and they just can't get it through their heads. Like, you consider yourself a feminist, right? Well, do you think that you'd be allowed to be a feminist anywhere else in the world but Europe, and then maybe East Asia or whatever, right? So it's very funny, on this topic,
It's mind-boggling. So what you're trying to say is women shouldn't vote? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, we want Sharia law.
Yeah. So we're getting at. No, but it's mind-boggling. You'll have women that almost, and they'll fight. So we would have thought in the past that the idea of a burqa or a niqab, where you're completely covered, you can only show your eyes, and that is to stop males being, attracted or have this desire for you. That seems pretty barbaric. It's a bit kind of not our culture. But then you'll have feminists today being like, yeah, we love that. We love that. I'm like, guys, huh? The old feminists would have fought against that. New age feminism embraces that. They want it.
It's all part of this sort of at this point, I don't really see any principle in any of these leftist movements, because they're all on some level complicit in mainstream politics. I think the last really true leftist movement you saw was Occupy Wall Street. And of course, Wall Street at the same time is pumping all this money into NGOs that, push these sort of progressive things. So it went from Occupy Wall Street, which, even I would agree with, was a noble sort of aim at the time. Of course, in 2008, you see the big bank bailout. So that's something like people on the right will also be like, okay, well, there's something there. And of course, what happened right after that? Well, all of these, all of these people that can flood money into these different social movements now all of a sudden becomes social justice, becomes BLM, becomes gender identity. It's things that don't really threaten the establishment. And one thing I think is interesting, maybe you have some thoughts on this, is that even prominent leftist political philosophers, one of them, I don't know if you've ever heard of Zizek. He's the guy who talks like really nasally. He's like, "Oh, you see here, we'll,
I think
movie."
I do.
You know what I'm talking about?
Videos. Yeah.
You probably have. Even he's like, there's nothing revolutionary about transgenderism. There's nothing revolutionary about this LGBT stuff. It doesn't threaten anybody. It doesn't threaten anything in the political establishment. It's a cope. It's almost like a controlled opposition where the left is not revolutionary at all. The only revolutionary thing to be today is the right, because that's that's the faction that is oppressed both institutionally and even on the ground. And I don't know, maybe you've seen some of this in Ireland, and you mentioned that right-wing people can't really talk at all in the media. So
well, I heard about, I never looked into it, but I heard about what you're talking about, where after the crash there were those protests against what happened in the banks and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, it was like race and it was gender. And I was like, wait a minute, why are these popping up? And people got distracted from this thing and they got moved towards this weird ideology stuff. And what, did you look into it? Is there something there?
Oh, absolutely. Even with the climate change. And here's the funny thing, right? Unlike most people on the right, I generally actually do kind of agree with a lot of the ecological arguments. Like I'm all for, reducing pollution, all this stuff. But if you really 100%. Look into what the left is actually pushing, all these initiatives, so look into ESG, for example. I forget the acronym that it stands for, but essentially it's this effort by big businesses to appear like they're working for the environment, but meanwhile they're getting tax breaks. They're able to get certain grants, and they're putting all the brunt of climate change saving. They're putting it on the consumer, right? So there's this stupid thing. There's this guy Neil McCoy Ward, I think is his name. He's this British guy, English guy who he talks a lot about the economic situation in London as well as like immigration and stuff. But he was talking about there's this stupid thing where there was like a banking company, and they would send you this card that was like a little bit more environmentally friendly, but meanwhile in replacing the card they have to ship it, they have to put it in an envelope, they have to do all these things. So like net saving the environment or whatever is probably like less with all the other resources you go in. So it's like it's very much it's a optics game, right? You're playing the optics game of appearing like you're progressive, you're appearing like you're doing something, whether it's the environment or the LGBT stuff or the race stuff. But meanwhile, you go to like BMW in Saudi Arabia and everywhere else in the world, Germany, Spain, whatever, they do the rainbow BMW logo. Saudi Arabia, Dubai. What happened to the principle? I thought everyone was principled here. It's all just optics, and it's the same thing with everything I'm mentioning, because it's all about creating an illusion of social justice, but at the same time, the real issues that are truly revolutionary are put to the side, as we saw with Occupy Wall Street. Like that was real. That someone on the right, I could be like, okay, we're getting somewhere. But then the only good thing that came out of the left was gone. So you have to ask yourself, okay, how legitimate is the left really, and how much is it actually a extended weaponization of this mass anger for the purposes of the establishment, right?
Yeah, that's where I get black pilled sometimes, because I think we underestimate the power of these mainstream connections or media or whatever. I feel like at a drop of a hat, they could whip most of the population up into a frenzy, and we're just left to our own devices. So I see stuff on X, and I see the narrative change it. But I always think in the back of my head, they could just, if they wanted to, they'll switch the game up. Seen it during COVID, of course, that, how easy it is to get people to believe a certain message. Even when that message contradicts itself, it was like, get vaccinated. And this boggled my mind. This threw out everything else out of the window. It was, get vaccinated to protect yourself, right? So you're protected, you're assuming. But even if you're vaccinated, the unvaccinated are killing you. So you can be vaccinated, but the unvaccinated, I don't know if I can talk about this. Is this going on YouTube?
Oh yeah, you can talk about whatever. I usually don't. I talk about crazy stuff all the time, so I should be fine. Yeah,
you'll have to cut it out. But that statement alone contradicted everything. It was like, well, how can you, if you're vaccinated, how are the unvaccinated hurting you? And still people went along with it, with something so contradictory as that. I was in awe, completely in awe.
And on that topic, I did some research into this, and there was actually an intentional effort of the Biden administration to suppress any anti-vaccination or anti-COVID measure news coming out of the media. And what's interesting is that you'll notice that very early on there were people talking about, hey, like these things didn't go through the proper FDA, FDC trials or whatever. These vaccinations didn't go through that due process, and yet they were mass exported to the population. And anyone who said stuff like, oh, this is going to have long-term impact on people's hearts, that was the biggest thing. They said that was all false, right? And it was called misinformation. It was called misinformation under the Biden administration. And then what are we seeing today? Not everybody, right? But enough people that it's worth noting. I don't know the exact percentage of especially young men that are dealing with like the after effects of the vaccine, but it's enough that it's like, okay, clearly the people saying this was a potential side effect weren't lying. They weren't. It wasn't misinformation or disinformation. Like, now we're seeing, and they admitted it too. Like the people who said before that it didn't exist, now they're like, okay, it does exist. So it's like, what do you make of that, right?
It was shocking. And I remember that time, even if you mentioned it on Instagram or Twitter, you're deleted. You're gone. Like they'll just like, no, I've had enough of what you say, and completely suppressed. There was so much of that. What was your man's name? Is it Robert Malone? I think it was, who went on Joe Rogan, and he came up with he was one of the founders of the mRNA vaccine. And even that at the time, he was very reasonable. He never said anything too crazy, very just like a scientist, a medical professional, just straight, on the ball with everything, didn't want to speculate too much. And even that was like completely shut down. You can't listen to this guy. It's just a crazy, crazy time. And this is the problem. Now they're pushing this idea of misinformation. We have to cancel misinformation from the internet. This is big in Europe. And then who gets to decide that? If we listen to them back during COVID days, everything they would have labeled misinformation turned out to be true. And they want to do the same now. Joke.
And, you're talking about the power of, let's say, the establishment to do these things. And one of the things in America today is obviously, but even on the right, there, not everyone feels that the Trump administration is perfect. But regardless if you think Trump is perfect or not, at the very least, speech is a lot more open under Trump. And that's 100%. If I had one reason where I say I would vote for Trump every time, it's that it allows the Overton window to shift, where even if Trump is not all the way doing the things that you need to happen, it's a step in the right direction, because now we're thinking, at least we can talk about it, right? And this is a funny thing. I'm not a big fan of Nick Fuentes, and one of the things he said was like, okay, Harris should have been president, or like now they're trying to do the Newsom stuff. I'm like, all right, like you were reinstalled because of people like Trump. The reason you're able to talk today is because of people like Trump. And he says a few things about Trump that, I'm like, okay, I see that. But at the same time, to pretend it would be any better on the left when they had, for example, now it's the Department of War, which sounds pretty cool. But back when it was the Department of Defense, Lloyd Austin was the Secretary of Defense, and I had multiple friends that were kicked out of the Marine Corps because they had this anti-extremism measure. But then what's extremism? You have people who are openly communist in the military who
Right.
are not docked for being extremists. But of course, somebody makes a joke like 5 years ago, and now it resurfaces, and now they're kicked out for extremism, or
Wow.
you're friends with the wrong person. So I guess what I'm getting at is,
It's
you know,
wrong.
there's a step in the right direction with people like Trump, where it's like, even if they're not perfect, and, you know, I do consider myself a pretty big Trump supporter. I admit he's not perfect, but at the very least, we're now seeing a shift towards potentially, like, it's a like, I'm sure you could agree, it's a steady step. You can't just expect the full victory right away.
I have a problem with all that stuff, dude. That's a big problem on the right. It's a big problem everywhere. It's the same on the left. If you don't agree with everything someone says, they hate them. Do you know what I mean? It's like this, you can't have a few disagreements over certain topics. And that's a big thing on the right. You'll see people just hate each other, lambast each other, just over a small difference of opinion. And I don't understand that. With Trump, I get it. Like, he says a lot of good things. I get why people are upset with him, especially with the Epstein stuff and kind of just not being fully transparent with it. And he said he would be, all that kind of stuff. But there are good things he's doing as well. His cabinet is putting a lot of pressure on Ireland right now with hate speech, which is brilliant. He's putting, I think, travel restrictions on the people in Cumushan, I think it is. If they push these kind of, I would say, unlawful, but just restrictions on speech, which is brilliant. I think it's fantastic. If you had, say, someone like Harris there, chances are I'd probably be banned on Instagram, maybe not on X, thanks to Elon. But yeah, and like that with Elon, people have this big, they have it out for Elon a lot of the time. But if Elon didn't buy Twitter, the conversation would be dead. There'd be, I sometimes wonder what it would be like, because he bought Twitter, Instagram also reeled back its censorship. If he never bought that, I think everything would have progressed in more censorship, more restrictions, and I think it would have been terrible. Sometimes I'm interested to see what it would be like, Paul. Yeah, because I can't imagine it. Yeah.
I think that's a great point, actually. I haven't really thought of that, because I've noticed even on YouTube, I feel that the restrictions have sort of been pushed back, and they used to be really, really bad. I think what happened with YouTube, obviously in, was it 2016? No, 2017, when Charlottesville happened, and they were cracking down on the alt-right. Even if you were not exactly the alt-right, if you were adjacent to that, you were getting booted off of YouTube. And I think you're absolutely correct, where if Elon Musk didn't have X, because here's the thing to sort of paint to the audience, is that if everybody is banned everywhere else, they're all going to go to X. And if they're all going to go to X, you're going to take away the revenue for like Meta, right, which is Instagram, Facebook. You're going to take the revenue away from YouTube. So, you know, I completely agree. And sometimes I'm too hard on Elon. And I think the reason why is because he has so much potential. No, I overall, I have a positive opinion of him. Okay, but it's like, it used to be I had a 70% approval of him, and now maybe it's like 55, because he has so much potential to change the whole game. He's the wealthiest man in the world. I mean, things like SpaceX. I mean, we talk about, one of the things I talk about on my channel a lot is technological development. Like, what is Amazon or Facebook in terms of true human innovation? These are things that make life more comfortable. They make life more,
convenient.
Convenient. But something like SpaceX, that's sublime. That's transcendent. That's pushing to do something that's going to make all of us, it's not going to make our lives easier, but it's going to make it richer, in the sense that, like, wouldn't you want to know the secrets
inspirational
of, precisely. That's the truth. Like,
you probably watched the first video where the two rockets landed at the same time. I was just like, that is insane. It inspires you. It's amazing. Yeah,
it makes you want to also contribute to that, or also be part of that that sort of, let's say, that evolving history. One of the things I talk about, I did an essay recently, and in the essay I mentioned that the problem with the West is that there is no more enemy. During the Cold War, even, what do? We went to space. We landed on the moon because, in opposition to the Soviet Union, we had like it was almost like a spiritual struggle. There was no utility to going to space over the Soviets, but it was a moral and propaganda victory. That's another thing. Propaganda, if you admit it's propaganda, I don't have a problem with saying propaganda. Let's propagandize more. But that was something that was forward-reaching into the future. It's something that inspired people to be more. Now with Elon, you see like the AI girlfriend stuff. I don't know if you've seen those.
Yeah, not a big fan, I'll be honest. I think it just pushes us into like degeneracy, you know. It's not good. It's not good. It's not the society you want to create, I don't think.
Especially when you're trying to raise the birth rates. Like, I don't know how creating an AI girlfriend is going to help the birth rates, Elon.
Yeah. Do you hear the stories of? It's bigger for girls, believe it or not, but girls getting like, they'll have ChatGPT boyfriend and they'll be talking to the ChatGPT daily, and they'll have fake fights with the AI and everything. It's just a big thing that's happening. Guys, less so, but there are a few out there. But girls, it's big for girls for some reason.
I think probably, and maybe this is getting a little bit crass, but it's worth noting. Like, you know, usually porn's a problem for men, and then like smut, like that erotica stuff, is the problem for women. So probably more.
Yes.
I don't know the word I'm looking for, but if you're reading like erotica, ChatGPT, it's like the same thing. Whereas men, it's more visual. So like this, I mean, it's still terrible. This AI girlfriend Annie or whatever, the Grok one. Yeah. She's like dancing. It's terrible. And I know her well.
I know her well.
Right. Oh man. No, but it's funny because I wrote a fiction novel. It's the first book I wrote, a fiction novel, and it's sort of like I wrote it over a year ago, and I realized all the similarities into stuff I was talking about. It was essentially in the future, people are going to be stuck in simulations, or like, you know, video games, but like also have the sexual element to it. And it's like, what's the point to live in real life when all the fixes that you want to have, all the highs you want to reach can be reached with no effort at all. And that's like sort of this big thing with the future. And, you know, and actually, surprisingly enough, it does tie into what we're talking about with immigration, because if you think about it, what is the end goal of these people or whatever? It's to have a society that, you know, is easier to control and is more dependent upon the services that, you know, let's say, you know, the establishment can provide you. If you have everybody hooked to these things, then they're not going to want to do anything. They're not going to challenge any of those institutions, right?
That's the big problem. And like, how do you get someone to look up? They might get their emotion from the phone. They might feel angry. They might be, you know, feel like they want to do something, but you know, you scroll again, and it's literally forgotten about within a few minutes, few seconds. And my friend said it has to get a lot worse before it gets better. It has to be on your doorstep for you to actually be like, okay, let's do something now. And I think that's the tough part, because people are, as you said, so hooked on just, it's dopamine. Like, you're getting your feed the whole time. And how do you change that? And the algorithms are so good nowadays. Even I find myself just being sucked into it, and I hate it. You know, I hate how addictive it can be. And sometimes I think, how do you even say now, moving forward as a society, how do you fix that? Do you just throw your hands up and accept it, or do you put like a blanket ban on certain things? And it's a challenge, and no other time in history has this challenge been faced. So it's interesting how we're going to overcome it.
Yeah, we're essentially you know that there's that story in the Odyssey, the island of the lotus eaters, where they're eating that lotus flower, and they just want to lay back and live on that island. You know, Odysseus is trying to get his men to go back to Ithaca, go home, but they're all this, you know, it's a simulation. And maybe I should do a video on that, talking about that myth as an allegory. But you're talking about something that I actually touch up upon a lot. And I think there's two solutions. There's the solution that you mentioned where it's like blanket ban these things. But the other solution is sort of it's a sort of accelerationist position, which I think is problematic. But here's one thing I've said on many videos is that I think the future is going to be determined by the people who can resist these like, let's say, black holes, right, that you're entering into. And the thing about why the West and, let's say East Asia as well are suffering so much and compared to, let's say places like Africa or the Middle East is they don't have all these commodities. Their continuity is having 7 children. And this is precisely the issue with birth rate, right? Like they're coming in, and also there's institutional issues. They're getting money to do this. They're getting free housing, right? They're getting welfare. But on a meta level, on a spiritual level, they don't have those same outlets, right? For them, the way that they live is have a shit ton of kids, have their hyper religious life, whatever. And that's like a big superpower in a sense. Like, why did the Taliban win? It's because they just kept fighting. They didn't care how many of them got blown up. They didn't care how many times they had to go back into the mountains. They just kept fighting. So at a certain sense, maybe the battle is won if you just keep fighting. So what I would say, and I'd like your thoughts on this because it's a little bit controversial, maybe you just give this stuff to everybody. You give it to Africa, you give it to the Middle East, you give it to everybody. And like most of them are going to get hooked on it too. So whoever doesn't get hooked on it, all right, that 1%, maybe for that 1%, all right, now you can start to rebuild. I don't know. What do you think?
Such a banger idea. Airdrop iPhones into Africa connected to TikTok and everything else. It's a banger. It's tough. Like, it's tough. You used to think, obviously, with the improvement of quality of life, birth rates decline. I don't know. I was reading something today that talked about the women's value. Once you put them outside the home and you devalue the idea of having children, women look to other things to determine value, and having children's down here. If you're a boss babe, if you worked 5 years for, Fortune 500 company, it's like, whoa, this is, now I'm up here. While, Sandra, who had 3 or 4 kids, is still down there. So they're looking at each other differently and in a wrong way. It would be much better if we could just, I don't know. Someone said that's why women shouldn't be allowed to vote, shouldn't be allowed to have jobs. But I think if you could control the propaganda, if you could control the media machine, you could put women who have kids on the pedestal. I think if you could do that, because there's no pro-family propaganda anymore. You just don't see it. But yeah, about the whole Africa thing. Yeah. So what? Just airdrop drugs, iPhones, the whole shebang.
No, seriously. I mean, because in a sense, right? Like, there's this funny story that they shared where they introduced the internet to some small tribe in like Latin America, and within a week they're all vaping and they're all like watching porn. Maybe that's like a sort of allegory to what modernity does. But on a certain level, right? I think a big advantage of, let's say, like the global South is the fact that there is an impetus to live in a certain way. There is an impetus to have large families. There is an impetus to structure your society in such a way where you are tribalistic, right? Because one thing you have to say about them is that they have this idea of friend-enemy distinction. They see their fellow, African groups come together, Middle Eastern groups come together. They have a clear, this is us and this is them. And that's something that Europe doesn't have. Europe doesn't have that idea of fraternal brotherhood, like, let's say, during the Crusades or during the Islamic conquest when they were stopped at Tours or Vienna. Then there was an enemy. So then you have to have a shared common identity that sort of unifies people together. The immigrant groups coming in have that, right? They have that friend-enemy distinction. You'll see like 20 guys, and it's sad. They'll dog on one people. And that's one thing I think the Irish have that the rest of Europe does not. Let's say Western Europe doesn't have. I see a lot of these Irish guys fighting back. I see groups of Irish guys that are getting a hold of it. Like they still have that sort of that vigor. I don't know. Do you see that? Yeah. Do you see that in Ireland?
Yeah, I love it. That's why I think Ireland could be the first in Europe to fight back against this mass push for just endless immigration from the third world. I do think Ireland could be the first country to push back on it. You see them putting up, and I don't condone this, but putting asylum centers, they were arson attacks. There was, I think, over 30 in 1 year. I might have that wrong, but I remember there was a lot happening. And it works, like, not saying that works, but the one in Coolock that was set to go ahead was cancelled because people just kept destroying it. They kept, I think they set the digger on fire and all this kind of stuff, which is like fair, you know.
It's I get the anger.
Community. Yeah.
One of the things I always used to say, because I went to Ireland back in 2019. I'm only like, you know, a little bit like a fourth Irish or something. So, but I still have like, you know, I still really liked it, and you know, I got that. I still have that affinity, but I really loved it. And I think back in 2019, the immigration crisis hadn't really set in yet, so it still felt very Irish. I still felt like there was a strong cultural presence, even in Dublin. Like it did not feel like it was over flooded or swamped or whatever. I went to parks there, and the parks were clean. There was nobody, you know, in the parks like you see today. But the reason I mentioned that is one of the things I said was you see working class people who are Irish, right? You see poor people who are Irish, which sounds bad on the one hand, but when you're like lower economic class is also like European or Irish, that's almost a good sign, because it means that they haven't been replaced with other people to, you know, to fill like those working class labor jobs. Obviously today they kind of have, which is unfortunate, but there was a vitality. And even in, this is maybe not exactly a good thing, but in Belfast, you see all these videos of people throwing petrol bombs at like, you know, cops and stuff. And like, while like maybe that's not a good thing, at the same time, it shows a willingness to go against the law if they feel it's necessary, right? So maybe in a sense, that's kind of also a good thing. You know what I mean? Like, not that I'm advocating for anything, but
we're not advocating. We're not advocating. But I think you're right. I think you're right. You talk about fatality. It shows a willingness to fight back, which I think for a lot of European populations, they've been castrated, you know, they've been pacified. They're just so passive. They just don't, they let things happen. It's like, okay, you know, you just feel, suppose they just feel down about themselves and say, oh, look, there's nothing we can do. It's a bit of black pilling. But yeah, with Ireland, there's still that nationalism. There's still that patriotism within people. Because not too long ago, we had to fight for our country and our identity. So it's still there and it's still strong. And I do think it's reaching a boiling point. They know that they can't keep it going. There'll come a point now. It's just something's, the way it's gone, there's so many people in, it's almost inevitable something's going to happen. And if something does happen, then it's going to be complete chaos in Ireland.
Yeah.
And the only ones to blame are the people who thought it was a good idea to flood Ireland with third world migrants. Nonsense. You know, different racial groups. It just doesn't work. It never works.
Yeah, you sort of have this myth of assimilation where you don't really see it. I mean, especially, I think it's most prevalent with like, for example, in Africa and the Middle East, you know, India, let's say, because, you know, and you know, I'm perhaps a little bit biased. Obviously, I'm in America, but I'm like half Asian, and generally, you don't see like East Asians. Like, first of all, Indians aren't Asian. They're in Asia.
Agreed.
But they're not like Asian. So my family is half Filipino. My mother's Filipino. You never see Filipinos out committing crimes or doing these things, but this is also going to hurt those groups who have not,
100%.
you know, been a part of that. They're also going to bear the brunt of these, you know, these people who are being savage, frankly, you know, people and like predominantly, like I said, from Africa and Middle East. This is going to affect every single group, even the ones that have not participated in this thing. And you understand why, because when it gets to the point of, all right, there's stabbings and killings and all these things, you're not going to make that distinction because it's, well, you know, where is it coming from? It's coming from these outsiders. So that's something I think about as well in Europe, is that it's going to affect everybody, even, you know, like groups that historically have either assimilated or at least have not,
It is, and that's why
caused
it's.
unrest.
And I have a few friends who are immigrants in Ireland and all that. And you'd feel bad for them because they're in it too. They're relatively fine. They live a good life, no harm. They're fine. But because they're flooding these places, while we are struggling for services like houses, hospitals, schools, creches, all are just completely full. You're there. The government is still bringing in lots of people from places that are so genetically dissimilar. Like you have people coming over from groups that this is the problem, and it's still kind of taboo to talk about. But the IQ difference could be 15 points, and you're bringing them into a first world society, and somehow thinking they're going to integrate or do well when they're competing with people who are so different from themselves. It's completely wrong. They're going to feel hard done by. It's not going to create a good society. There's going to be friction. And fair enough, now it's kind of just starting to happen. You're bringing people in. But if you don't reverse it, come 20 years' time, then you'll see the differences. Then you'll see the fighting. Then you'll see the people, crime going up, people, just not a good society. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. It's a funny thing when people talk about diversity and they talk about like harmony with different groups. The only time you ever see harmony is when there's a clear majority, like an overwhelming majority. Yeah. When there's a few people, or you have a very authoritarian style government like Singapore. Singapore is a multi-ethnic country, but what do they also? They also have some of the strictest laws ever. Or if you break those laws, you get, you can never be an African migrant acting the way you do in Europe and act that way in Singapore. You will be totally,
But they probably don't have a lot of African migrants, do they?
So when I was in Singapore, it was mainly Indian. I guess that was like the most like non-Oriental Asian group that I saw there. But I guess the point being is that if you ever saw them trying to do that, that would not slide there.
No.
And it used to be that way in Japan, but now even Japan is sort of suffering from this sort of globalist agenda. I've seen you posted about it as well. So it's kind of crazy that even East Asia, which, is allowed to have more an identity than Europe is. Like generally, if you're like Japanese or you're Chinese and you want to be nationalistic or whatever, you're generally allowed to. Like it's not, you're not called a racist or whatever, but even now you kind of are. Like East Asia is starting to get that same thing.
It's interesting how it's happening, isn't it? It's very strange. And this is the thing. They always go, we need immigration because declining birth rates. I always think if you cared about declining birth rates, fair enough if you spent the last 20 years trying to improve birth rates, trying to put in incentives there for people having kids. If you did all that stuff, put in policies, all that kind of stuff for 20 years, and then you said, look, guys, we're going to have to bring in immigrants or something, I'd have a bit more respect. I'd be like, okay, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Things weren't going the right way. They've done none of that. They haven't tried to increase the population of the natives. They just said, we need immigrants. Let's bring in hundreds of thousands of them. So it's like, okay, good luck. No thanks.
And on top of that, they incentivize birth rates for the immigrant groups with all this welfare, free housing, stuff like that. So yeah, I completely agree. And, in America's a little bit different. Our struggles are a little different than Europe. Well, it's not a little bit, a lot different. We have some things that are worse here. We have some things that are better. But generally in America, I would say things that I've noticed compared to Europe is there is a lot more of an acceptance of, or a lot more acceptance for like right-wing views. Like you mentioned, there's all these different groups. Like at this point, Daily Wire is not even considered right-wing anymore. That's how far.
True, yeah.
We
how far it's gone.
Yeah, right. Which is a good thing, I think, because here's the funniest thing in Europe, or no, sorry, not Europe, in America, is you'll even see some people who are traditionally leftist and they don't have any friends that are leftist. They have friends that are right wing because like, these leftist people are so stupid that we can't even talk to them. So you see one of the best Nietzsche guys who does a podcast on Nietzsche. He's Uber Boyo and him have done a few videos before. It's called Essential Salts. Like he's, he considers himself a leftist, but you'll see that all his viewers all are from the right, just because there's this big shift of like, okay, on the right we can actually talk about things, and this is both a strength and the weakness, because the left, they're so hive-minded that they can act as one cohesive force against the right, whereas like what you mentioned is the right, you said in Ireland, and it's true in America too, are so disjointed because of that freedom of thought that it's like they're like this and the right is like this. You know what I mean? So like 100%. That is going to beat this, but it's a struggle. So
it's a good thought that that because they're so aligned ideology, like in terms of ideology, they are one big group, while the right are, as you say, disjointed. They might have a slight difference of opinion here or there, and because of that, they're all over the place. Plus, there's no organization on the right. I don't know. America's not too bad, but in Europe, there's no organization. Like, I was looking at Stand Up to Racism for England. You can go on their page and it's like resources, and they have loads of posters you can just click on and download and all this stuff. But the problem with all this stuff is the money. Like, a lot of these, leftist ideology NGOs get government funding, and they all funnel it to each other. And then it has donors. I think a lot of time foreign donors. So they have USA. The money. Yeah, USA, exactly. They were doing, I think they have, did you see all the silly money they were given? One of them was like 80,000 for some play up in Dublin, which was like a transgender thing. I was like, why? What are you doing?
Where they sent, there was like some, I don't know if it's true or not, but I think I saw something where it was like some gay Palestinian, gay or transgender Palestinian thing. Like, they don't even exist there. The Palestinians don't even like gays or transgenders in Palestine, but it was like something weird like that, where it makes no sense.
Queers for Palestine. It's like,
it's
mad.
No, it's absolutely right. Like, there's, I think that's the biggest thing with funding, because the left has the funding. The right does not have the funding.
Yeah.
This is true, especially in art and media. This is something the right has not paid attention to, because, for example, I don't consider myself a conservative. I would consider myself like a progressive, right? Not progressive in the social sense, but in the sense that you can't conserve things in the past. You have to move forward. You have to create new institutions. And you do that culturally, you do that through art. And, the conservatives have always been like, oh, don't go into art, become a banker or become like, an engineer. But the problem is that culture comes downstream from art. And if all the artists are leftist and all the money is going into leftist art, then that's going to completely rework the entire ethic and value system of your society. So in a sense,
banger thought. I like that. I rate it.
We gotta. So we have to pump money into projects which are right wing. You don't even have to call them right wing, but affirming of that sort of vitality, because they put some, like that show that Musk replied you to. It was like some transgender woman to man who got pregnant or something. What the fuck are we talking about?
It's so ridiculous. Yeah. Oh my God. But you're right. And I'd love to see that stuff pop up. I just wish we had, I was thinking there recently I'm useless at art, terrible at art, can't draw to save my life, all that. But with AI now and image generation, I was thinking lately, like, you can take some old folklore tales from Ireland and obviously try to make a story out of it or something, but hopefully in a year's time, 2 years time down the line, you could pump in scenes into AI and create these tales that will kind of inspire people to go back to that identity, that Irish identity, and have a bit of patriotism again and become a bit more nationalist. I think AI might help with that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I was actually talking last week, a guy by the name of Kevin Deanna. He goes by James Kirkpatrick on X. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's been involved in the right for like 20, 30 years. So he's like an OG, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
But we were talking about exactly what you're mentioning is AI. What's great about that is you don't need that big studio funding anymore. You don't need that. And I think you should have that, by the way. I do think we should get to a point where we have that big funding for the right. Yeah. But even without it, things like artificial intelligence, Uber Boyo does a great job of utilizing artificial intelligence for storytelling. He's kind of played around with both images and I think some short form videos. But I completely agree with you. And one of the great things about technology is it doesn't have to be retarded. Like we don't have to use technology in a stupid, porn addicted sort of way. And this is one of the things that's part of my project is how do we, because look, technology is inevitable. Like these things are going to happen. We can't ignore them. If you ignore them, that's how the enemy wins. They use them. We don't use them. We lose. Right. And one of my big projects is, well, how do you use it? Because you have to use it in a way where you retain that vital element of life. You don't fall to the porn brain bullshit.
Yeah.
But you use it in such a way that actually affirms real life, with technology as a medium. And there's this great quote. I used it in my last the essay I was mentioning that I wrote, and it's from Nietzsche, actually. I'll just read it really quick because I think it applies to a lot of the things we're talking about. So he says, unbelief in the momentum are perennius, an actual drawback which accompanies the cessation of metaphysical views, lies in the fact that the individual looks upon his short span of life too exclusively and receives no stronger incentives to build durable institutions intended to last for centuries. He himself wishes to pluck the fruit from the tree which he plants, and therefore he no longer plants those trees which require regular care for centuries and which are destined to afford shade to a long series of generations. For metaphysical views furnish the belief that in them the last conclusive foundation has been given, upon which henceforth all the future of mankind is compelled to settle down and establish itself. The individual furthers his salvation when, for instance, he founds a church or convent. He thinks it will be reckoned to him and recompensed to him in the eternal life of the soul. It is the work for the soul's eternal salvation. Can science also arouse such faith in these results? So, for the audience, what that's essentially saying is that in this modern age, you're talking about why does no one have kids anymore? Like, why are these women? Because we don't value the future. We don't value a progress into the future. Like, the left pretends to be progressive, but they're life denying in every single capacity, whether that's abortion, transgenderism. You're not going to have a family if you're transgender. And if you do, that's also bad because now you have a kid that's going to be fucked up. Like, what the fuck? I have two, anyway, but what Nietzsche's talking about here, one of my favorite quotes ever by Nietzsche, what he's talking about is that to have any sort of life of value, we can't just live for ourselves. We can't just live for the present.
You kind of can see that what he's talking about there in the older generation, that boomer generation, where they've kind of sold out. We feel like they've sold out our generation, and I read something today that they are buying more property now, that older generation, than millenniums and Gen Z combined for the first time ever. And it's like, guys, what are you doing? It's that kind of disregard for the future.
That's 100% true. And, it's funny because it probably goes back to what we're talking about with conflict. These people were born into the most prosperous time probably in human history. They think, I can pull myself up by the bootstraps. But they were born in a time where you could get a job out of high school, which could feed 4 kids and buy a house, and your wife didn't have to work. It's not the case. This is another reason I don't blame women. I think too many people blame women for all this problem of modern feminism. That's an oversimplification. These women no longer can live as full-time mothers. They can no longer live as, and also men are also failing to meet the mark. You see men today, and I just look at it. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? There's a lack of responsibility, a lack of assertion, right? Assertion of your own will, putting yourself out there in such a way. Now everyone's so passive. So I don't blame women at all in the sense that, like, I think it is an equal blame. Like, this is something where women are falling short, men are falling short. And it's precisely because of this. You talk about the boomer generation. That's the perfect example of exactly this quote. They are all living for the present. You see these boomers, like, there's the joke, like they put all their money into charity, or they spend all their inheritance for their kids on vacations around the world. There's no sense of continuity, right?
No. It is like that. Even when they talk about even the fact I was trying to, so for so long, I was trying to convince the older generation, let's say my own parents really, to that the immigration we're seeing isn't good, essentially. I had kind of given up, and then it just kind of trying to kind of get them to think of the future. One of the things I said, I don't want my kids or my grandkids to be in a school full of, and it might sound harsh to some people, but Indians or Africans, whoever it might be. I want them to be in a school full of people like them. And I think it's unfair for us who have gotten to grow up in the ideal situation where you're surrounded by people who come from the same place as you, who think alike, to just throw that away for those that come after us. I think that is, as what Nietzsche's saying there, it's just a disregard for the future. It's like, what is it more comfortable for me now not to say anything and let them deal with it, or which is better? And I think right now it's better to push for giving them the best opportunity they can have.
Yeah, and there's two things to that, because obviously a lot of mass immigration has also been pushed by the economic class, which benefits from, obviously lower wages, all these different things. And, that also plays into this lack of care for the future.
Yeah.
And one thing I personally sort of can assert, from America or whatever, I'm not in Europe, but when I visit Europe, I don't visit Europe because I want it to look like Islamabad. I visit Paris because I want it to look like Paris. I visit Dublin because I want it to look like Dublin. The same way where if I want to go to my mother's country, the Philippines, I go there and it's Filipino. I experience Filipino culture, Filipino food, Filipino people. I go there to experience that. I don't go there because I want it to look like New Delhi. And even, you might want to go to Islamabad in Pakistan, and you have the ability to, and you're going to be surrounded by Pakistani people. So it's this idea of, cultural richness. Europe is, such a rich history and all these things. And I mean, even on a very materialistic level, right, which can appeal to the boomers. Even if you're trying to appeal to the boomers, yes, the boomer, don't you want to have a good vacation? It's like they can't even see that far.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy, but
it is miserable, and it ties into what you're talking about. And you'd think the left would care about this. The left always talk about the big corporations. Well, they used to be anti-big pharma, all that, anti-big government, but it's completely inverted now. But you would think they'd be against these corporations bringing in people from different regions to keep wages low and increase profit. But they're all for it. They just think it's fantastic. Like that with diversity. They're all about diversity. But mixing, as you say, I want to go to Germany and see Germans. And that doesn't mean I hate other people. It just means I want Germany to be German. Same with England, Scotland, Belgium, wherever you go. I want to visit these places and almost be engulfed in their culture and their people and experience that, because that's richness, that's diversity. If we open all the borders to Europe, it all becomes the same. Yeah, and I don't think there's any beauty in that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the thing is that it's all about scale, with these things, because on a very small level, even if you go back to World War II, you might have a few people, right? But at that point, for example, one of the things you see in the United States, you have these old Chinatowns that have existed for 100 years, but it didn't dominate the city. It was a very small part, and it made things a little bit interesting. But these aren't people that you see everywhere. You want to go to Chinatown, you go to the Chinese Quarter, you have some Chinese food. It's nice. Now it's like, instead of one little Chinatown, you have I use the example of New Delhi and Islamabad. Like that's not just a little town. That's like the whole place now. In the past in America, you'd have Little Italy. You'd have little towns that looked German, right? You had a nice little mix of things, right, where you had a little exposure to everything. But first of all, that's America, so it's a little different. But now it's not diverse. It's not diverse because it's just one iteration. It's primarily, so even in these cities, I guess what I'm getting at is it's even the people that want to use the example of diversity, well, it's really not diversity because it's coming from one area specifically. This is coming from Africa, the Middle East, and India, which is, that's not diverse, right? It's one specific general push, and it's an overwhelming push, which replaces, like we mentioned, those places like Germany, that cultural identity, and then also like the aesthetic, right? Like I want to see Parisians, I want to see Germans. I don't think that's a terrible thing to ask for. And there still is cosmopolitan places like, New York City, for instance, that's, you do have a lot of different people, but this is America, right? This is not Europe. This is a new place. It's a new project. Europe has stood, for all these years. You have these Gothic cathedrals and everything. I don't want to see a mosque in the place of a Gothic cathedral,
No.
So I completely empathize.
Yeah, and it probably goes back to your point as well that we do need, because leftist art, I think, is probably very international, very global. If the right embraced art, you'd see German-specific art, you'd see Irish-specific art. I think that would raise people's national spirit, and people would more identify with their Irishness rather than this whole, we're one, as they say, one race, we're all globalism. No one's different, essentially. Which is a problem. You see, and this is the thing with Chinese. With the Chinese, they never went to these places. Like, Chinese never went to Ireland and said they're Irish. They said they're Chinese. You have Nigerians, Indians, Somalians, wherever they come from. They'll arrive into Ireland and they'll start walking around LARPing as Irish people, which is, it's silly. Like,
it's not even that they're LARPing, because if they were LARPing, that'd at least be some, that'd be some like copying. They're not even trying to LARP. They're being what they are, and then they're saying it's like replacement. Because like on the one hand, you could see somebody, obviously I don't want to see like the LARP, the full on, like, like for example, there's this orchestra, and there's all these people doing the orchestra, and they had this like this guy like doing a hip hop dance in front of the orchestra.
I've seen that.
Yeah. But like it's and that's bad, but it's not even that. It's not even that. They're just getting rid of the orchestra entirely, which is altogether a worse thing even. But when it comes to art and what art venerates and the sort of values that it posits, it's absolutely true what you're saying. And I think one thing that perhaps on the right that I've noticed that is a big issue is, like, right now, for example, the world European population is at 7%. It's very low. And the thing is, you don't really see a lot of people, for example, in the United States, most people obviously who are not white tend to be leftist, right? One of the few exceptions to that is Vietnamese people. Obviously, they were under communism, so they hate the leftist stuff. But you see, for example, I think it's interesting you're mentioning the Chinese, and I think in East Asians specifically, if you look a lot of the values that you have in East Asia, there is a lot of high trust. For example, I always say I feel safer. Well, when I was in Japan, when I was in the military, I got really drunk and I got separated from my friends at 3 a.m. And I walked, my phone was dead. I walked in the direction I thought my Airbnb was. I don't know how the hell I made it back, but nothing happened to me. I was, someone could have easily come along, done whatever. Nothing, right? In Japan, even in the Philippines, which is a very poor country, I feel a lot safer there than I would in, let's say, a place like Atlanta, Atlanta in the United States, or like Chicago, Los Angeles. I feel a lot safer there, where people are poorer. Yeah. People don't have as much. They have every reason to, but they don't, because there is this idea of a high trust of social cohesion, right? So, but the problem is a lot of the, especially something I've noticed, being of a half Asian ancestry, is a lot of Asian people that come here, the first generation values are very much, conservative. And like I said, I'm not conservative, but there's a utility in that. They're not part of this leftist stuff. Then their children get indoctrinated to hate the West, to hate, Europeans, and then they see themselves in opposition to that. And then you have, specifically East Asians that naturally would have more of an affinity with Europe because of a lot of the shared values of cultural, of stability and social cohesion. But then they go to the left because the left has control over the academic institutions, over art. And one of the things I'm trying to work on is it's kind of a funny little play on words. You know how like they say Hyperborean?
Oh yeah.
So I'm trying to create a thing called Hopaborean, and it's since I'm a Hapa, I'm half white, half Asian, to sort of show that Asia shouldn't be in opposition to Europe in terms of values and all these things. There's a lot of the same issues faced in Asia that you see in Europe, and that don't be a stupid leftist communist, whatever. But that's just something I noticed,
Is it prevalent in the US? I don't see it much in Ireland. I don't see I never see East Asians. I don't ever see them causing problems. I'll be honest. They're very just keep to themselves, head down, and just respectful.
It's pretty much the case. There's a few. Funny enough, I think the few groups that have sort of caused problems that are like more like Southeast Asian. Like there's a people called the Hmong. HMONG, who are kind of a diaspora, not exactly like the gypsies, but maybe a little bit. And most of them are fine in comparison. But there's some crimes with them. Early on, you saw a little bit of Vietnamese crime, but for the most part, East Asian crime is lower than even European crime rate. And like the funny thing was they tried to do this thing called Stop Asian Hate during COVID. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
And who was doing the Asian hate?
I remember.
It wasn't white people. It was not white people.
It kind of soon shut down when we realized who was committing the crimes. It was like, okay.
It's like, And the funniest thing ever, I'll send you the link later if I remember. There was this article they tried to push where it's like, actually, Asian hate is committed by white people, and they picked 14 cases. And the only time that they considered it a hate crime if something verbally was said in relation to race. So even though there was hundreds of non-white people attacking Asian people, they didn't include that in their data set, for obvious reasons. But Asian hate, that went away really fast. But I think it's really stupid and retarded how many Asians associate with the left and associate with this cult of victimhood that is common in minority groups, because it doesn't really make sense. Because like I said, Asians are not engaged in the same sort of behaviors. And look, and it's not, and even I would even go so far as to say that not all of these groups of people that we're mentioning, for example, a lot of people that come from the Middle East are not even as Muslim, right? Some of them are part of, like, for example, like the Islamic Republic of Iran. Before, when you had the Shah, you had people that pretty much were living a Western lifestyle. These were educated people who hated radical Islam. And, I mean, I would like them to go back and recapture Iran.
And the same thing happened, what's kind of happening in the West now, happened in Iran, where you had leftists and Muslims come together to just kind of rip down the structure of society, being like, let's tear it down. And then now it's like an Islamic state. It's like, okay, well done, guys.
Well, that's a great point. You know what happened to all the leftists?
The
Islamic Republic of Iran. They got killed. They got killed. They didn't get kicked out. I wish they could have got kicked. No, but it's true, because the communists and the Islamic Republic of Iran actually molded together. And what happened was the Ayatollah basically outmaneuvered them because they outnumbered them. So even the Soviet Union was funding Saddam Hussein against Iran, because they were also like, oh shit, our communist people there got wiped out. So that's what's going to happen. I think it's more so in Europe, because in America we don't really have a large Muslim population comparatively.
No,
and
it's growing. You kind of see pockets of it appearing.
But you don't see as much radical Muslims in the United States. They're a lot more secular. Like, I've noticed that most of the Muslims here tend to be more educated than the Muslims in Europe. A lot of them that I've met hate, the radical Islam stuff. Not to say all of them, but it's less of a problem. Like Islam specifically, for us, it's like more like Latin America. In India, there's a lot of immigration too. But I think the Islamic problem is really prevalent in Europe. And you see what you're talking about, this alliance of Islam and left. And the only thing they have in common is resentment against the West and against Europe. That's all they have. They don't have any shared values, but because their hatred is so strong, that will compel them to self-destruct, because at the end they're going to fight against each other.
It's mad to think, as you said, they're so ideologically different, yet they'll come together just for shared hatred, basically, just wanting to strip That's, you know, whatever structure's there, just tear it down. It's like, okay, guys, calm down.
Yeah, because at the same time, it's like, what's a more conservative culture than the Muslim culture? And then what is the least conservative? It's the leftist. And you know, there's this stupid thing where they were trying to create like it was like the Christian Muslim alliance, and it didn't work out very well. I wonder why.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like they're trying to say, well, actually, you know, we should be enemies of the left, blah blah, and it didn't work out too well. But
people need to, and that's the thing. People have this idea that, you know, we're all just one race, human race, ideology doesn't matter. But like, has anyone seen history? Even in Ireland alone, a small difference in religion, even though we're both Christian, had like huge effects on the country. Even to this day, we're separated by a border up the north where they have a bit. And people think you can bring in lots of Muslims, Africans, Indians, people from all over the world, and it's not going to cause problems. It's like, guys, give it a few years.
Yeah, it's a good point. And one thing I have to say about that is, at the same time, I don't support Balkanization. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's essentially where they want to get like all of the individual European nationalities to be these small sort of states.
Oh,
I also think that is a form of weakness as well, because the idea, if the EU wasn't so retarded, if it was, let's say you had like a right-wing EU, like a pan-European kind of imperium, something of the likes that Nietzsche talks about, you could see this cohesive European force actually being a good thing if it was not, you know, working towards this sort of global economic lead, if they were looking out for each individual European country's interests. Because the problem is the EU is going against the individual interest of each European nation.
Great.
And, you know, when they talk about opposing Russia, it's not for the right reasons. You know, it's not because they want to defend a European identity. It's because they want to expand this sort of, you know, specific ideological hegemony against, you know, whatever. So, like, I guess my solution that I see is I do believe in this concept of empires, because I think when you have an empire, and you specifically have an empire with a central authority, you're able to delegate in such a way where in the British Empire, you didn't see immigration coming from India. They controlled. Yeah, maybe you have some thoughts.
No, I was just going to say, are you in favor then of like a monarch, or what's your thoughts on democracy and all that?
I'm not a fan of democracy. I don't believe in a hereditary monarch, for example, the likes of a feudal system. Because I think
kind of like Rome, kind of.
Yes, precisely. Well, my project, one of the names I kind of used to curate my project, or you know, the culmination of all the different ideas, I call it New Rome, Nova Roma, because you know, it was this cosmopolitan vision, and it did encompass a lot of people, but it was always with this strong, you know, Rome fell when the central component of Rome delegated too much. You know, for example, they hired barbarians to be part of their army. Their slave population got too large. But, you know, in its beginning, when it had a strong central authority, they were able to delegate in such a way where they weren't replaced, where they created that strong cohesion. And I do think that Europe is capable of that. And that's something that the EU could have been if it wasn't dominated by, you know, retarded politics. So I guess to answer your question, I don't believe in a monarch, but I believe in a sort of like a imperial figure, somebody who is not, like, for example, you mentioned Rome. They didn't inherit most of the time. Emperors didn't inherit the empire from their fathers. They were adopted, and they were given this sort of patronage from their father figure who raised them to be, you know, based on merit. So, like, I don't know how familiar you are with like Plato's Republic.
No, not familiar.
So they have this concept of philosopher king, which is not, like, for example, they say, I'm droning on a little bit, but you have a gold father, which might be the initial king, right? But the gold father can have a bronze son, which is like a shitty, like a Commodus, like Marcus Aurelius to Commodus. But then you could also have a bronze father who has a gold son, maybe like a blacksmith, but somehow his kid's a military genius. Like Napoleon came from a middle-class family, right? From Corsica. So I guess sort of what I'm saying is that I don't believe in a monarch the way that it was in feudal Europe, but an imperial figure in a sort of I would say like
the role, is it?
Yeah, like not a meritocracy in the retarded sense where like, oh, equality, but a true meritocracy, a true aristocracy, because aristocracy defined by the ancient Greeks, defined by Plato, just meant rule of the best. It didn't mean it was inherited. It meant the best people would rule. So if you can create a system that accurately ascends quality to these high positions, which was the case with Plato and the Guardian caste, which is like the elite that he's positing. If you could do that properly, then, I think that would be like my ideal political system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Marcus, I read his book, The Meditations, and what struck me is you read this book that's 2,000 years old and you're reading his thoughts and you're like, bruh, I couldn't even think like that. Do you know what I mean? It's just fantastic. And the way he looks at things, I'm in awe of it. Do you think then AI could be that in time?
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I did, one of my guys I do podcasts with, I go in his podcast a lot. It's called AGI for President, which means Artificial General Intelligence for President. Yeah. So I say, no, I don't want AI to be in control, because I do believe in human agency, and I believe in independent will. So Martin Heidegger, probably one of the best philosophers of the 20th century, talks about human relationship with technology in such a way that we retain our independence and we don't let technology dominate us. So that could be seen in two ways. Either it could be Skynet, Terminator, technology literally dominates us in the sense of being subservient to, a matrix robot class. But then it's also what we're talking about with porn. You can enslave yourself with technology by the things that you create yourself. And then once you reach the threshold of pleasure in porn, why I go to Mars. But, to answer your question, I actually sort of believe loosely in an evolution with technology, like finding ways. For example, imagine if you had a Grok super computer, like sort of implanted in your brain. You have perfect memory, instantaneous computing power. You're still in control, but now you have this wide array of information and data and processing power in such a way that you won't be replaced by technology. We retain our independent will, but now our capabilities are expanded. So that's my project. And this guy, Jason Georgiani, Uber Boyo, has done a lot with him. I've done one podcast, hopefully another podcast soon with this guy, Jason Georgiani, and he talks about this. Like, that next human development is going to be not technology replacing us, not ignoring technology, but finding a synthesis, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like it. See, that's the thoughts. I always think, but even when people talk about the future and where everything's going, I just see people being almost disregarded. Like, if you get to a stage where you have AGI, it's like, what's the point? Like, you might think of yourself as, I suppose religion comes into this and all this, you're really valuable, you're great, but when you're looking at Mars and stuff, if you get robotics to a state where it might be as movable as us, we're not going to be the ones exploring space. It's going to be a robot that doesn't need nutrition, doesn't need food, that can just go off for however long and do what needs to be done. And we become obsolete. What good are we? We're just hooked on drugs and,
Yeah, I think that's true for most people. But what if you're the person who doesn't, for example, tech, a lot of these tech elites, they don't let their kids have free reign on technology because they know of the way it reworks the brain. So I think, if you retain your agency and your independence from all these vices, which are very strong, it's going to be very difficult to do. If you can do it, you can see such an evolution where maybe, like, even if you yourself, let's say you're not physically in Mars, you've watched Avatar, right?
Yeah.
You remember how they would get the consciousness into the avatars?
Hook into,
Yeah, well, that could be cool. Imagine, maybe your organic body is not there, but if your sensory perception has been placed in an avatar on Mars or whatever, right? Then you're still experiencing it in a beautiful way.
That's cool.
That's
cool.
That's what I'm saying, though. It's not, we don't want to be, my project is, don't ignore technology because you're going to be replaced.
Yeah.
Don't let technology replace you, but find a way to be part of that ever evolving process and embed yourself in it so that you retain freedom, essentially. Because the only way you can retain freedom is by evolving with power. If you just become the Amish and you live in your little communities, it's beautiful, simple life. Sure. I see value in that. But at the snap of a finger, if the American government fell, a bunch of rioters would come in, kill you, steal your crops. My joke I made in one of my podcasts is like, if we let the Terminators take over, these little Amish people are going to be chilling, doing doing their farms, and these Terminators are going to come in, steal their wives, kill the men. It's just going to be fucked up. So you can't do that. That's what I call a Luddite. But I also don't want to be replaced. I want to affirm agency and freedom, and I think we do this in a way where we find a middle ground. Like
I like the idea of having like that synergy where you can experience what, I don't know, what that robot might be experiencing on Mars by just hooking up and in different places. You kind of see it happening too. What's that, Neuralink and all that, where I think Elon Musk is set to restore sight in people now that are fully blind, which is just unbelievable. I know you might you're around 50%, but I think he is phenomenal. Just one of the best minds of our generation, just in terms of pushing humanity forward.
Michael McCarthy's been bought off by Elon Musk. I'm joking. No, I completely agree with you. Like I said, my 55% is not because I dislike him, but because I think he's capable of so much good. I just want him. I've heard rumors that, for example, he might be on drugs, like ketamine specifically.
I heard that, yeah.
And if that's true, then that's like, go ahead.
You just had a bad experience with Annie. Just
well, no, I've written so much about these things, like this particular problem. And I know how dangerous it can be because I've sort of like studied like I guess not studied in an academic sense, but I've played around a lot with where this could go and how it stifles the human will. Yeah.
What's the biggest? Give me the biggest, like the biggest fear. I know I myself see it and I think it's degenerate. I don't like it. But what's the biggest problem or fear you see it having on society? That kind of stuff.
I would say I'm more afraid if I would fall to that sort of thing. So think of it like this. Think of addiction and how addiction has evolved over time. If you go back to the Mesopotamians and when they made beer, their amount of alcohol content in that beer was negligible compared to today. But like they got drunk off of it, sure. And you get beer, and then maybe you get tobacco. Maybe you eventually get weed and synthetic drugs. You get cocaine, I think early 1900s. And then you have something like porn, right? Now you don't have to go buy the cocaine. You don't have to, snort the cocaine. You don't have to risk your life doing cocaine. You just go on the internet, you find porn. It's so accessible and it's very addicting. Now imagine something like that, but multiplied in infinitum or whatever the word is. This is only going to evolve more. Because imagine, for example, take video games. And I don't think video games are all bad. I think they can be very good. They can actually allow you to play creatively. But if you use video games as a proxy for real life, then something very bad is happening. You're trying to find affirmation of life within an artificial simulated reality because you yourself are coping for the fact that you can't access that in reality. And this leads to birth rates. So if you have... Imagine a perfect simulation like us. Like, let's say this is a simulation right now. Something this crystal clear, maybe even clearer than this, because then you could start to put in some weird, futuristic elements. But even this. Now, imagine we're engaging in a simulation like now. Now, imagine that simulation you're on like a cheat code, right? You could, I snap the fingers. Now I have a big band of 10K in my hand, or I snap my fingers. I'm in Cairo or I'm in Abu Dhabi. That's really going to fuck with people because if you could do that in the simulation, why would you want to do anything in real life? And my fear is not that it's going to happen in most of society because I think that's inevitable. I've resigned to the fact that most people are going to fall to this, and I see it as both a good and a bad thing because the good in it is like we're getting rid of a lot of our enemies. So that's good on the one hand. I'm just afraid that I could also fall for it because it's going to be very strong. So that's my greatest fear. I don't know. What's your greatest fear? Well,
I love it. I love hearing about all this because it's insane to think that could happen. And then you have to contend with the idea that if everyone else is doing it, you're thinking to yourself, it's going to be so hard. Like if you can have something that addicting, it's going to be only... you're not doing it is suffering. So you're going to just have to walk into suffering rather than just relax with a bit of pleasure. I don't know. It's how far away do you think that realistically is?
It's a good question.
10 years?
Well, to feel this real like this real, like us talking right now, probably 10 years, but there's going to be steps towards that. Even look at like this thing that Elon Musk created. That's a step towards that, or VR in general. That's a step. And the thing with technology, something Peter Thiel talks about, and I have both negative and positive opinions about Thiel, in the same way that I have negative and positive opinions about Musk. I'm probably around the same. I feel about Thiel probably the same as Musk. I don't know how familiar you are with Thiel, but he says that the way technology works is it's like boom, plateau, boom, plateau. So with VR, I remember back in like 2015, no, maybe 2017, 2018, like they already had those VR goggles. And, they haven't developed that crazily since then.
Yeah.
So it really depends. I would say 10 years is a guess, but with these things, you never know. Like it could happen in a month.
Did you
or it
try
could take
them?
forever.
Did you try the VR goggles? I remember trying them at a store once. And keep in mind, whatever I was looking at was very pixelated. It was but you just get absorbed into it. And that's why you see people, they'll fall over or they'll actually run because all of a sudden you're there, because it's what you're seeing and your brain's picking it up. It's insane.
Yeah, I guess with that, it's like right now we only have the visual and we have audio, right? So it's only two senses. It's going to be how do you end up with other senses? And one thing in relation to this, for example, once they get more into the neuroscience of how dreams are created and how to control dreams, that could be some way that they're able to reach a simulation, because our dreams are sort of a simulation. Like it feels real even without this full immersion of senses, right? So there's a lot of ways that they could approach that. But yeah, I don't really know how long it'll take, but me and you, our mission, I think, besides all of this, here's the one thing. Here's the white pill in it. Okay. All this immigration stuff, it could be a non-issue soon. It could be a non-issue because what if we get to the point of abundancy that all these people are hooked on it? There's not going to be mass immigration anymore. You're going to have them hooked in their little simulation sites in like Gambia or something. Yeah. So not to say that we should get complacent with these things, but I wonder how much longer are these issues that we see today going to be issues. This is something I heard Nick Land, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's this sort of techno accelerationist guy. He was on a podcast with a Bronze Age pervert. And funny name, I know, but
I know on Twitter.
Yeah. Maybe I'll get him. Actually, I'd like both of them to be on my podcast one day. I've asked. I'd like that one day. But anyway, they were talking about birth rate decline, and Nick Land said we might reach a point of technological development before we reach the birth rate collapse. In which case, it will sort of negate these issues, and we're going to have a whole nother plethora of different issues that emerge out of that. So I guess what I'm saying is what I think, the sort of long-term things that people like you and I ought to be considering is how do we ourselves retain our agency in this sort of, post-human, postmodern future. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know how you'd integrate it into society then. Do you know that kind of way? Like how would you even, if it is possible, you have that technology out there, it's widely available. It's just
it'd be like PCs. Like everyone has a PC now. Everybody would have their stupid little simulation thing, boom, they're in.
Hooked up. But it's going to be so much more addictive. It's just going to be, you see a lot in anime, watch a bit of anime, you'll see that a lot of the storylines revolve around having this thing where you're sticking on and you're in another world. I'm guessing
that's our line or something.
Yeah, exactly that kind of stuff. I don't know. I can see people getting sucked into it. The only way to do it is have an outside world, which obviously I think we need to get back into teaching philosophy in school and just teaching people good ethics, stoicism. I like stoicism. Go back. I think we need a religion aspect as well. I'm not sure. Are you religious?
I have a unique, I guess, like since I'm onto all this futurist stuff, the way I see it is I believe that our idea of God and the Logos is omnipresent, but not omnipotent. Like it composes of all things, Like that's the sort of view of, you know,
God, yeah.
the metaphysics. I think the initial thing that we end up, so not to drone on this, but for example, in the Greek mythos, there's Hesiod's theogony, and their first being is chaos, and chaos gives birth to the earth, to the underworld, and from there you get Kronos and the Titans, and from there you get the gods. I kind of like that because it shows an evolution of higher beings, right? So chaos is what starts in the beginning, but then, you know, God, or the idea of God, is a sort of evolving thing. So I guess my religious views is I would like, my religion would be creating ethics for the future rather than saying, okay, this is how it was in the past, this is what we should be like. I say, okay, this is where the future is going. Here's a form which will allow us to integrate and live in the future, where we affirm life, we affirm things like beauty, rather than getting stuck in, like I said, like the sort of porn paradigm. So really quick, I don't want to, because I'm interviewing you, obviously, I don't want to drone on, but
I like it. I like listening to it. It's good.
Cool. I just want to make sure. But one thing I always like to bring up technologically, like the negative and positive uses of technology, and people disagree with me on this, but take hormone therapy for transgenders versus TRT, testosterone, for men. When people take performance enhancing drugs like steroids or testosterone, they're elevating their ability to interact with the world. For example, now they can lift a lot of weight, they can dunk higher, they can, people in the military, people don't realize how rampant steroid use is in elite units like the Navy SEALs. It's very freaking high. And on the flip side, you have transgenders. Well, why are they taking it? They're taking it in such a way that actually stops them from engaging with life, if you think about it, right? Hormone replacement therapy, these people they're not doing crazy feats in real life. They're not doing crazy things. They're actually constraining their ability to interact with the world. Now they can't have kids. Now their hormones are going to be imbalanced in such a way where they're going to be weaker. They're going to be less healthy. They're probably going to have mental health issues. And you could view something similarly in how you create a religion of the future. It's what are the things that you're trying to affirm? Are you trying to affirm people being comfortable, and which, or like, because I think that's the thing with transgenderism. They want to be comfortable. I'm in the wrong body. I need to be comfortable 100%. In my own skin. Yeah. And they want everyone else to be as disgusting and ugly as they are. That's why they don't, because then it makes them feel less bad for being lower, right? They want to bring everyone below, and I want to bring everyone higher. And this is the whole Nietzschean project. I'm not saying do steroids, by the way, guys. I'm just saying it illustrates a concept of how we approach the future. You want to approach the future in a way where you live less and you constrain yourself, and and also, by the way, I think a lot of transgenderism and this femboy nonsense comes from porn addictions. That's a different conversation for a different time. Like, do you want to be like that? You want to be happy? You want to be satisfied? Or do you want to be like this bodybuilder or this military guy or this athlete who he's unsatisfied? He's like, I have not done enough in my life. I need to take that extra step that I can't take right now. I want to, do I want to be in or out? Do I want to preserve or expand? And I think life is about expansion, and certain things, certain ethics can lead to expansion. And one of the things I don't like about Stoicism, I used to be a big Stoic bro too, but then I sort of rethought about it, is like Stoicism, a lot of it is preservation. It's about balancing your emotions in such a way where that balance is good, but then you should act from that. So rather than sort of flowing with nature, you need to actually go beyond nature, right? And this is where going into Mars. So I also started reading Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and then that other one, Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. Great stuff. But then the next step for me was Nietzsche. So after I read that, I read some Nietzsche. So maybe that would be like my thing. You got to read some Nietzsche.
Yeah, I need to get on Nietzsche. I did listen to the podcast. It was like one of the great courses, and it went into will to power.
Oh, bye.
I think so.
That guy's kind of been controversial recently.
Is he? Why? What's he doing?
He says he's decent at a surface level analysis, but he feels very much like one of those guys who's very performative. For example, he was he did this post where he's like, Nietzsche was an incel, he couldn't get women, his whole philosophy is cope, and it's like, what are you talking about? He does a lot of clickbaity stuff, but actually, I mean, I think some of this, the stuff he says, is good on the surface level, but to get the full immersion, I would recommend Uber Boyo. Obviously has a lot of great videos. and then Nietzsche podcast, this guy Essential Salts. But you got to read Nietzsche. That's like the next.
Stoicism's
great, but then you realize, okay, I got that as a foundation, and you go to the next. Like for me,
which is the best? I always think like the podcast, the course thing. It kind of, as you say, you have to read it. You have to read his words. Which is the book? Because I know there's like is it The Road to Zarathustra? Is it?
Oh, Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Oh yeah.
I would not start with that.
No.
It's kind of
what would you start with?
Bro, it's perfect because I'll tell you too, and then I could tell the audience. This will be like my Nietzsche reading list. So I guess I'll first say which I started with, and then in hindsight, which I might do. So I started with Beyond Good and Evil, because it's one of the most all-encompassing of his philosophy. Yeah. So Beyond Good and Evil. Then I read Birth of Tragedy, which was his first book, and this is very much like a exploration into culture, art, and then actually Greece and the development of Greece from, for example, you have like the Iliad and the Odyssey, like the Homeric times, and then you eventually end up with Socrates and Plato, and you go from tragedy to like this moral sort of good and bad type dialectic. Anyway, Birth of Tragedy. Genealogy of Morals was the next one I read. Then I read Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And then I think from there it was like Human All Too Human. Will to Power, I kind of intermittently read it throughout all this stuff. Because the thing with Will to Power, it's a collection of essays throughout his life rather than one like synthesis of a book. So it was like compiled after his death. So it's kind of like, it's hard to follow sometimes, but you can also kind of read a little bit of it, put it down, read more. And then I read some of the smaller books like Ecce Homo and Twilight of the Idols, and I think the last book I read.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot. But you can get if you just need like I said, my channel is big on philosophy, so I kind of felt the need to read them all. But you could know most of what you need to know about Nietzsche from Beyond Good and Evil, and then Genealogy of Morals. Those would be like the two books I would recommend to read, because those are the books that cover almost everything that he's about. And Thus Spoke Zarathustra, it's more so if you want if you like fiction, for example, and it's kind of like this. It's a very it feels like an epic, like it's not like telling you this is my philosophy. It's more like you have to read between the lines.
All right.
So I know I droned on a little bit there, but
I'll give it a go. Yeah. You recommend?
Oh yeah, he's my favorite philosopher by far. Yeah. I would say he is the most prophetic thinker probably ever, in my opinion, because what the whole thing with philosophy is that everything was based upon this very ascetic. So they believed in an invisible world of good and evil that existed, and it was kind of ingrained in us inherently. And this is sort of the Platonic philosophy that ends up influencing most of the philosophers since Plato. So guys like Kant, Hegel, they're trying to figure out what the good is.
So they believed you were born with a sense of good and evil, is it?
Plato, yeah.
Plato,
so that's so Christianity gets a lot from Plato in that sense. But Nietzsche said, okay, we're trying too hard to find out what good and evil is in this sort of supersensory world. And they say he philosophizes with a hammer because he breaks this whole moral paradigm that has existed since Plato, and he's trying to assert something that's more affirming of our interaction with life. So, for example, a lot of his morality comes from, for example, like beauty, power. Like, why do we, for example, find ethically that we align more with like a lion compared to like a rat, for instance? Why is a lion more beautiful? It's beautiful because it asserts itself onto reality. It kills animals and it's powerful. It's beautiful. This rat, it's like the transgender versus the bodybuilder. Like one of them is very inside themselves and doesn't want to assert themselves. Like and then one is trying to interact with reality.
It's like a lot of symbolism, is it? Kind of.
I would say so, because it's almost like Nietzsche is trying to, for example, one of the things that he explores is the idea of art as a sort of like a physical form of morality. Things that are beautiful are good. Things that are ugly. I obviously I'm generalizing it a lot. Like it's a lot more complex than that. Yeah. But as a generalization, it's more so, what do you think is life affirming? Like you probably find a difference between, for example, the joy of drinking a beer and the joy of, like, let's say, climbing to the top of a mountain, right?
Yeah.
Like those are different things. Like one of them, like technically the drinking the beer kind of feels better, but not really. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I suppose that's where suffering comes into. You find a lot of the times the most enjoyable things are at the end of what's difficult, you know, that kind of way. There's a bit of that in Christianity with the carrying the cross, you know, everyone has their cross to bear and carry uphill.
I would say that the main difference between, you mentioned Stoicism as well, is like for Nietzsche, he wants you to live a life where you have the utmost pain, but also the utmost pleasure. Where, for example, like in Buddhism, they want you to feel a middle ground of pleasure and pain. Some philosophies, they want you to feel pain. Some philosophies only want you to feel pleasure, which is probably like these leftists. They just want to, jerk off to their porn all the time and do all their bullshit. Nietzsche is saying that to affirm life, you can't live only for pleasure or pain. You just have to experience the utmost of both of these feelings. Because if you think about it, take skydiving, for instance, right? Like that's terrifying, but you're putting your life completely raw out to the elements, soaring across the sky at however fast you're going. You have to live in such a way where you expose yourself to all the raw emotions that life can offer you, which is why I myself am not conservative, because I believe in a going forward, not in the lame progressive social justice equality thing, but going forward in such a way where we expand our abilities to engage with reality, which is why things like, like I said, the robot avatar thing, that could be a good thing, because now you can go somewhere where you couldn't go before. Like that is my progress, not the progress of this bullshit, but a progress of feeling more strongly and more powerfully. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does make sense. But it's interesting then, but you'd be conservative and traditional in kind of, how would you say it? Would you say socially?
Like in what works? I would say
what
what works.
Yeah,
so I'm not trying to conserve that. I see that
like
works,
a nuclear family.
Sure, birth rates, right? Having a big family.
Yeah.
I don't. So for me, I'm not doing that because they did it in the past. I'm doing it because I know it's also going to work in the future. Does that make sense?
I get you.
Or like take, for example, like with this transgender stuff, right? I'm not anti-transgender because it said so in the Bible or something. I'm doing it because it's going to fuck us in the future. You know what I mean? I take from tradition what works and I carry it on to the future, but I don't take from it because somebody or something inherent says it's right, if that makes sense.
It does. So it's an interesting idea. So you kind of have to mix in conservatism with a bit of progressive ideology, because some of those progressive ideas might be good in your eyes. Yeah, they might
be good or they might be bad.
They might be bad. Yeah.
One of the things, like Nietzsche was talking about, Jason Trujani talks about this, is the importance for mythos, right? You need a myth to inform the future, but you don't believe the myth is necessarily exactly how things were. You use it as something to teach people. For example, Alexander the Great, he moved east with his armies because he had heard stories that Hercules had gone all the way to India. Does it mean that a real Hercules actually went to India? Probably not, but it inspired him to go conquer all these territories and make himself a grand figure of history. So I guess what I'm getting at is my conservatism, my traditionalism is the myth. You have to create the myth, but the myth can change. The myth can be malleable, but the ultimate form stays the same, which is an affirmation of beauty, an affirmation of power, and progress, not in the sense of equality, but honestly, let's have more inequality. Because inequality, it sounds bad to some people, but inequality is where difference comes from. Beauty comes from inequality. Something is only beautiful in opposition to a dialectic of what is ugly. Right?
100%. That's all the great stories are someone who a lot of the time has nothing and they're trying to achieve greatness. They're trying to become this different version. That's most great stories. Even Hercules is that, scrawny dude becoming the man.
or even the struggles he had to deal with, right? Like, I mean, I think I forget if he kills himself at the end of his life or something. I think he kills himself.
Does he kill himself? They left that out of Disney.
They left a lot out of Disney. In the real story, this god, I forget which god it is. Maybe it's Hera or something. Some god sends down like a person to give him a madness potion or something. Ends up killing his own family accidentally.
Oh, wow.
there's all this tragedy in his life because Zeus is his father and Hera, his wife, is jealous, you know, or something, and they're trying to get revenge on him. Anyway, it's honestly, you gotta go back. They call it the Gnostic, like going back to like the original mythos and text. There's so many interesting things in there you got to look at, which inform our morality and values today.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why I'd love to. I always listen to people and they have all this knowledge of, they're big into philosophy. And so I'd love to just have it all, you know, even the way people dissect some stories. They'll hear a story and to me, it might be very, you know, linear. To them, it's like, it's symbolism. What does this mean? He's holding this for that reason. And it's just fantastic that people can see that, you know, but it takes, I say, years to understand most of these stories.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but at the same time, like today, I think one of the good things about AI, because we're talking about technology, is what I will do sometimes. I'll read a load of stuff and then I'll just talk to Grok and I'll be like, is this the right interpretation of this? And I'm not saying to take it for its word, but it does sort of help you sort of test out your ideas, test out your interpretations. Because what Grok does is it takes from all these different academics in the past and it compares your assertion of what you think was the message with all those other people. So it doesn't mean it's right, but it does help you play around with ideas. So I would suggest that, you know, like after you read Beyond Good and Evil, you just start talking to Grok or something. I'd be like, okay, Nietzsche says this. Does this mean this? Or does this mean this? You know?
Yeah. With Beyond Good and Evil now, it's his idea. He doesn't lay it out. He lets you find the answer. Is it? Is that how it's kind of done?
The thing with Nietzsche is, like I said, he destroys the systematic approaches of the past. So a lot of his philosophy is a diagnosis and an analysis rather than a clearly defined solution. And he got sick and went mad when he was, I think, 35 or something. And he meant will to power to be that answer. It was supposed to be that answer at like his final best work, but then he went mad before he could complete it. So I would say every book of Nietzsche is sort of a diagnostic approach to life and phenomena rather than a clear answer. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
But yeah. Hey, I'm jealous of you. You have a great thing ahead of you. You get to like experience Nietzsche for the first time. Like that was for me, it was such a mind-boggling experience.
Is it? Jeez, you have me sold anyways. I've never heard someone kind of present it that way. That it actually does sound interesting. So, Beyond Good and Evil, start with.
Yeah, I would say so.
And then the genealogy of morals, is it next?
Yeah. Well, those are just the two most encompassing things. Something, for example, if you want to read that's more like poetic, Twilight of the Idols is good because it's very short, and it just sort of it feels more like it feels to me it's like almost like poetry when I read it. Whereas something like Genealogy of Morals is probably his most, like, for me at least, his most academic approach to philosophy, where he's like sort of laying out these different things. One interesting thing that you'll see in Genealogy of Morals is where he talks about, you know, the master morality and the slave morality, and he compares Rome to Judea, and he says that like this eternal battle is between like Judea and Rome, the conquered and the conqueror, and how he would say that Christianity was actually, you know, beneficial to Judea by essentially eroding the sort of moral valuation of Rome. This thing Uber Boyo talks about, and all these things, and goes into even more depth where he'll consider Catholicism actually like more European than Protestantism, because it sort of retained certain allegories to European paganism. And he says Protestantism was Judea's final triumph over Rome and all these things. But it's fascinating stuff. I absolutely recommend it. Like I said, I'm jealous. You get to read it for the first time. You know, I wish I could do that.
Yeah. Have it up here anyways.
There we go. Yeah. But yeah, it's great stuff. Anyway, like how much longer you wanna go for? I have plenty of time. You can kind of.
I'm easy.
Sounds good. We'll maybe we'll go for like 30 more minutes. Let's say.
We'll go 30 minutes.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. But yeah, you got to read Nietzsche.
Yeah. Well, I'm on Amazon here. I'm gonna buy it and give it a go because you've honestly me sold. I never heard
Oh
anyone.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
You should I don't know
Let's
how
start,
many of yeah, what's up?
I was gonna say I'll start with Beyond Good and Evil then and give that a go.
Sounds good. I gave my copy of that to my little brother, and he never read it. It's pretty
Did you
sad. So now, you know how many books I've given? Like 5 books to friends, and they never return it, and they've never.
It
like,
always
only 2 of them read it. Yeah.
It always happens. I gave a few books to. It was years ago, and I realized then you never give books to people. It's just unless you don't want to see them again. It's just pointless.
Yeah, it's like you're gifting it to them at that point.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm going to say though, briefly, is I don't know how many of Uber Boyo's videos you've watched, but he's a fantastic.
He's so good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially,
he's a. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say he's breakdowns on X and everything, where he'll, as you say earlier, he'll use AI images and it'll be all very well done. It's very good.
Yeah. His YouTube, if you like his X, you'll love his YouTube, because I think the way he does it is he's a storyteller. He finds ways to make it like this. He calls himself a storyteller. It's like he finds a ways to it just makes it captivating and interesting. And he makes Nietzsche very palatable without sacrificing the message itself. One of the things I don't like about Jonathan Bai is I think that he makes it palatable, but he sacrifices the actual essence of it sometimes. Right. Whereas Uber Boyo very much keeps the essence, but he finds a way to make it interesting. The way I would describe it is, imagine like a bard from like an old Nordic village in the Viking era telling you the histories of the poetic Eddas or whatever. Like that's how I feel he's talking to me, you know?
Yeah, it is good. And sometimes you listen to it and you'd be like, I like to explain stuff like that, you know. It's a good thing to get into philosophy because it kind of it's missing. It's what's missing nowadays, I think, just to have this kind of critical thinking of the way things order themselves, you know, why someone might act the way they do or believe the things they do. And metaphysics is just completely disregarded now. Everyone thinks there's this one idea of good or there's one idea of evil, and we're kind of born with it, which isn't the case, obviously. And philosophy digs into that.
Oh, you'll love Nietzsche. Just based on that sentence, that's in large part what Nietzsche is sort of approaching.
Yeah.
And what's sort of interesting today, this is something that Bronze Age Pervert talks about, Bap, in his book Bronze Age Mindset. He says the left claim to be moral relativists. They claim like, oh, you can make your own morality, right? Like you can assert your own good. But then look at how they actually operate. If you say anything that doesn't fall within their umbrella of acceptable speech, what happens to you? You're racist, or you're, homophobic, this and that. Like they're not
the inclusive left, as we say.
Yeah,
Are you
the tolerant left?
Yeah, the tolerant left. Yeah. Are you a big fan of Bap? Yeah. One of my friends is big into him.
Yeah, Bap gets a lot of hate from like the Nick Fuentes crowd.
Yeah.
Because they call him like the thing they like to say is gay Romanian Jew, but I think it's an unfair thing to say, because first of all, is he Jewish? He's half Jewish, but if you look at his writings, they are very critical of like the same things that Nietzsche points out with Judaism, of being a slave morality and stuff like that. So it's not like he's saying anything, like the whole thing. I think like people talk about the JQ a lot on X, and it's like it's gotten to a retarded point where, look, clearly there's academic thinkers who have criticisms of Judaism, and I agree with that. But then it gets to this whole retarded point where it's like, oh, this guy's grandpa was Jewish. Fucking, you know what I mean? It's like very low IQ stuff. And even Nick Fuentes is getting annoyed by it. I don't know if you've seen some of his clips where he's like, all the people super chatting his show. He's like, oh my, you guys are stupid. Like I made a post today where I said, Nick Fuentes is now getting like the karmic revenge. He's starting to realize what he created. He's like, oh shit.
You're almost looking for, like, if you disagree with someone, say on the right, you're almost looking for ties to get into that stage, early life
search or something.
Yeah. Is that, you probably know this, but is that not tied to people wanting an enemy? We have to have an enemy,
The problem with that is now you see, like, for example, a lot of Nick Fuentes' followers are like Muslim. And you see a lot of like Muslims and Christians, because they both hate the Jews, even though they are diametrically opposed to each other, there's some form of cohesion. So it's like, the thing I say is like, okay, you can blame, you can blame the Jews for all these things, but what happens if they have no more power? You're all of a sudden going to get rid of all your problems? No, you're going to start fighting amongst each other. So it's like, that's why I don't like all this low IQ stuff where it's like, oh, the world would be perfect if the Jews didn't have power. Like, look, is there obviously an overwhelming majority of Jewish influence? Yes. Is the United States foreign policy largely dominated by Jewish lobbies? Yes. But that doesn't mean that just because you oppose the Jews, that's like your friend or whatever. You know, these people, they're insane. And on
I need
top
to look.
of that,
I need to look up your Jewish ties. Give me a second.
I know. Oh no, he wasn't anti-Semitic enough. No, I can affirmatively say.
What's this about your mother? Israel?
One of the things I like to joke about in the dissident right is like, I may be half non-white, so some people don't like that about me, but at the same time, I'm 0% Jewish, so that's my saving grace. Like I'm 0% Jewish and I'm 0% African. So that's like okay. Anyway, I mean, my thing.
Safe.
Yeah, I have Jewish friends. I have friends who are black. A few friends who are Middle Eastern.
You are right. It is a difference between high IQ and low IQ, because you can talk about these things and understand it's not everyone. That's easy to understand. While people picking it up will think everyone's like that. I was listening to Keith Woods there the last day, and it was talking about IQ differences between race. And when we talk about IQ differences between race, for most people, it's just an acknowledgement that there is differences. When you have people down, that might not understand it too well, they think, so what's the conclusion? We have to get rid of them all. You have to, kill them. Someone actually went up to, I think it was one of the guys, anyways, I think it could have been Jared Taylor, and goes, so we have to kill them all. It's like, where are you going with what are you on about? Like, calm down. And it's just an acknowledgement, but for everyone else, it's like, oh my God, what do we do? It's mad.
Even Jared Taylor, like he always says, like, well, actually, East Asians have the highest IQ. So how can I be a white supremacist if I admit that? And Kevin Deanna, the guy I had on my show last week, he's very good friends with Jared Taylor. And obviously he's speaking to me respectfully. He's not saying, like, oh, you're half non-white, fuck you. I think another important thing to recognize is like, look, from my perspective, my priority is not like obviously there's a lot of people where their priority is like issues for white people. Obviously it's not my priority, but there's a lot of intersections. I want to see Europe's cultural and even ethnic, right? Like I want to see that identity preserved. I don't want to see it gone. So even though I might not be, my primary goal isn't like white identity or whatever, my ideas will intersect in such a way that also benefits that. And a lot of times with these really racist people, it gets to the point where it's like, just because you may not fit that complete mold, you're completely put to the side.
And you can't even have a conversation with them. They don't want to debate ideas. It's just a dismissal, You're not a part of that group, so forget it, which isn't the way, You should be able to talk, and like that, there is those nuances that need to be addressed. You can't just say, no, everyone who isn't like me needs to go, because most reasonable people you can't garner mainstream support with that. And if you can't garner mainstream support with that kind of ideology, it's either you get really aggressive and forceful to push it on the people, or it goes nowhere. So it's like, whoa. What's the aim? What's the goal? So
I think speech is a big thing. It's like you get to the point where you're so stuck in your ideas that you can't talk about them, then that's the problem. And I think it's a large part why you have so much like in regards to the JQ, why people are so anti-Semitic. It's because Jews have largely made it impossible to talk about criticizing Jews. That's why there's so much anti-Semitism, because as soon as you and it could be a valid critique, by the way, because I think everyone should be able to critique each other. If you can't critique Israel or Judaism, then like that's when that hate is going to fester, and conspiracy theories come out of that. So it's like a problem that I think largely Judaism created, because they created such a hostile environment for challenging Israel, for challenging Judaism, that now people are so fed up with that censorship that they're going to go to the far end rather than a middle ground where why can't we discuss the issues of Jewish overrepresentation? Like for example, like I said, I have some friends who are of Jewish descent. I don't hate them. Oh no. I don't hate them. But I can also say, hey, look, it's clearly you are overrepresented in politics, and clearly you should be able to say, okay, maybe it's a problem that sometimes a Jew might have dual what's the word I'm looking for? Or not even citizenship, but dual loyalties for Israel and the United States. Whose interests come first? Like, does America come first, or does Israel come first? If you are a Jewish American, you have to have American interests come first. Otherwise, that element of me criticizing your identity is going to come into play, and very validly. You know what I mean?
It is. And then when people call, does he actually?
Yeah, like I said, he does. He does Rome versus Judea in Genealogy and Morals, where he outlines all his critiques of Judaism, but also the critiques of like this retarded anti-Semitism. It's like you need like educated anti-Semitism.
Educated anti-Semitism, yeah.
I'm kidding it for it. There's a middle ground, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, brush up on my racism. You know, you're just looking up all the stats and figures. Yeah, I get that. It's a tough one. That's the problem. Like, it's on either end. It's not like the right are these extremely smart people and the left are idiots. You get two ends on both sides. And just like there's a bit of autism on the left, there's a bit of autism on the right.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see that on a lot.
A little more than a bit.
more than a bit, yeah. Exactly. Oh, yeah. But like that, what you're saying, so suppressing speech, sure, it just makes people, it doesn't do any good.
Yeah. And that's where you get political violence and hate and all these things. And you know, same with like you talk about the immigration problem in Europe. If immigrant groups were like 1% of the population, you probably wouldn't see all this animus because they would be contained.
Of course not. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like in Poland, Poland's like, 1% non-white, and you don't see any of these ethnic problems in Poland because they don't have enough there that they can cause problems. But then when you have 10% of your population is African, like France, that's when it happens. So it's like, and I don't think it's the thing about calling people racist or whatnot, or like anti-Semitic. I don't think it's racist or anti-Semitic to say things that are true. That's just an observation. Yeah. What's racist or anti-Semitic is if, like, obviously, if your conclusion of the low IQ stuff is, okay, we're going to just genocide a continent. My solution is humane. My solution is we're going to hook everybody. We're going to hook everybody to VR porn, and only the higher people will survive. You know? So I'm not genociding everyone. It's a quality in a sense.
You're basically drugging the whole population.
Yeah. Whoever can survive deserves to have agency. So it's like the great test of humanity. It's like I'm like doing a sort of a simulated Noah's Ark, you know?
Yeah.
My Noah's Ark is if you can reject the porn and the disgusting degeneracy, then you deserve to be part of the future.
It's true. That's the way it's gone nowadays, though. Although it might not be so severe, but if you can reject a lot of the stuff we see today, even video games, you can reject video games, you can reject porn, you can turn away from all those things, you're probably going to do better off than most, I would say. But on that point about the people there, still want remigration. I think that's a must. Yeah,
absolutely.
Facts. Yeah, it's gone too far.
And the thing is, remigration is the moderate option, I think, at this point.
You heard that as well. Yeah, that's what everyone's saying. Yeah.
If you keep going the way that you're going, you keep having these sexual assaults, you keep having these murders, that's when it's going to turn out to be a war. And at that point, it's like you can't really be like, oh, no more violence. It's like, I understand it. I don't want it to go to that point, but I understand it. Like, I guess that's sort of my one of the things, like I'll say, because I have a lot of people that watch my channel are probably a little bit racist, even though I'm not myself. But I understand it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I both understand it, and I will platform those people because our ideas should come out. You know, like even if it's somebody who's diametrically opposed to me, whether that's on the right or the left, if they can in good faith come and have a conversation with me, doesn't matter what they believe in. maybe there's like some, if they're like, you know, child like molesters, then I won't have them on. But to a certain extent, you get what I'm saying. I will, if somebody's respectful to me, I'll allow them to speak out their beliefs, and I understand
100%.
why people have beliefs, even if I disagree with them myself.
Yeah,
you know?
That's the way it used to be, and that's the way. Well, I like to think that's the way everyone used to be, but maybe we were blind. But we used to be able to sit down with opposing ideas, discuss them, and obviously the best idea wins.
Right.
Now it's, if you don't agree with me, you're Hitler. It's like, all right, guys, calm down.
That's another funny thing, is that like Hitler has become this like identity. Like, if you disagree with he's become this like sort of what is it called, cult icon, you know, where it's like at this point, like,
it's like the left. It's like the how would you say it? Just this. You probably have a word for it. Just the like worst person, archetypal worst person you could ever have. And that's the left's idea. It's Hitler.
Right.
But then the right are almost embracing it. They're like,
it's a form of rebellion against this, you know, this bullshit mind virus. And on top of that, it's like it's showing them, like, we don't give a fuck. And also, like, look, it's kind of fun sometimes. Like, it's funny, you know. Part of it's the memes. Part of it's like, look, I like good uniforms too. So even though I disavow. Hitler is terrible. Hitler's you know. I'm just kidding. No, I never disavow anyone. No, but you know, obviously, like, no one can deny Hugo Boss aesthetics.
That fish. That fish.
Yeah. Hey, you can't deny he had drip. You know. No, but even something like that, like the fact that Hitler has become such a taboo that you can't even talk about it. That's why so many people like love him. Like for example, I can.
Agreed.
Like, I'm not a Nazi, obviously, but I can be like, okay, oh no, Jewish.
Jewish. He's Jewish.
I did visit the place where Hitler started. Well, he didn't start the Nazi party, but where he joined the Nazi party is called the Hofbräuhaus.
Big fan.
I went there, and dude, I felt the power level. I felt the energy. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I knew the history of the place. But I went there. But like, even somebody like Hitler, you should be able to talk about Hitler in a way where you don't have to say, because like nowadays, or not really nowadays, changing, but like 5 years ago, if you ever brought up Hitler, you always had to start off with saying he was a terrible guy. Let me preface by saying that. Like, you should be able to talk about him without having to be like, oh, Hitler was a terrible guy. Everybody has nuance. There's nobody in history that is 100% bad, 100% good. There's good and bad to everybody, you know. And
I hate fake pretending as if he's just, you can't even acknowledge anything. Like you say, good and bad in most people, and you can kind of find nuance. It's this idea that, no, you can't even talk about him. He's all bad. Everything around him is bad. You know, he's like a cancerous cell. It's like, calm down, you know. Let's actually look at what he did. Some things are bad. Some things aren't too bad. I think he started Autobahn, didn't he? And all that
they
stuff.
did. Well, at least, he put a lot of government funding into that. To me, I think what that represents is like, clearly all the things he said were gonna happen in Europe happened. So it's like, you know, while I would not consider myself ideologically that, obviously, and obviously as a Hapa, I have a different ethnic identity to that. I'm more of a Mussolini bro, you know. Funny enough, I went to the fascist library or bookstore in Rome, Casa Pound.
You're really exposing yourself here now.
I know. Look, I did a test once. I did a quiz online, and it says I was 66.7% fascist. They called me a crypto fascist. I was like, 66.7%. I mean, I can do better. I was jealous. All my friends were getting 90%. Like, I only got 66.7%. But like, I would say, all right. Obviously, we're partially memeing, but actually, it's a good comparison. Is like, I would say fascism compared to Nazism is different too. But if you were to say, actually, fascism is different from Nazism, the left would be like, oh, so you're a Nazi. Oh, you're a fascist. Yeah. You know, where at this point, it's like, go ahead.
Yeah, well, like what you were saying, everything's fascist too. You know, it's not like Yeah, it throws away.
It's an insult to fascism, honestly.
Yeah, true. They are tearing, and this happened over the years. They are tearing down the use of those words, whether it be racist, fascist, what would you say, xenophobic, any of these words.
Sure.
Because they're so overused now, they have no meaning. They mean nothing. You know, everyone's a fascist, everyone's racist. So it's getting to a stage now where now it just means nothing, and people are kind of embracing it a bit.
Yeah. I would never call myself a Nazi, but if someone said you're a fascist, I'd be like, I mean, I guess it falls under the umbrella. I don't care. You know?
Yeah, I don't care either.
Do you see the new Mussolini show, Son of the Century?
No.
Oh, it's so good. You got to watch it.
Is it? Son of the Century.
You've probably seen edits. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Is
such
that
a bad
SON or SUN?
Son, yeah. SON, yeah.
Son.
It's a pretty good show.
Is it?
Yeah, I won't incriminate everyone else, but you know, just because I like to be very transparent about who I am, I will say I'm a very big fan of early Mussolini. Like he had some revolutionary points I like, mainly in comparison because early Mussolini was more revolutionary and more futurist. So he worked with this guy Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, who is a founder of this artistic sort of philosophical movement called the Futurist movement, which is sort of like an embrace of a technology and an ethic of the future. So, you know, I'm not going to disavow Mussolini on stream.
I feel like you have a lot of stuff that happened in the early 1900s kind of replicating itself today, where you have obviously polarization in political belief, where you have people who are turning communist, but you also have people going more fascist.
Yeah.
And it's literally the same stuff that happened early 1900s. It's interesting to... Where's Sky Original? Okay.
It's I don't know if it's an Italian thing or if it's just a European thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you can find the videos, the episodes free on YouTube if you just look up Son of the Century. Yeah, I watched it all on YouTube for free. The subtitles are kind of bad. Like there's his mistress is named Margarita, and in the subtitles it said Margarita Pizza. Whenever like he mentions her, yeah. But great show. You know, something to note about the fascists, which is interesting, is before the influence of Nazi Germany and stuff like that, there were like prominent Jewish fascists. There were prominent, you know, like fascists who were opposed to the alliance with Germany. They weren't they weren't like racial like the Germans were. Obviously, they probably would prefer that they had an Italian majority, which is like, you know, I don't think that's a crazy extreme position, but like, you know, there's this story of this Somalian or Ethiopian guy, and when the UN Italian soldiers came to a peace mission in Somalia, he goes up to them, he throws up the Roman salute and says, "I'm ready to fight for the Duce and the king." And it's this African guy. Yeah, and they kept him around, and he would always like salute them and like say like fascist stuff. So it's like, you know, fascism is not just for the white man. Fascism's for everyone.
Everyone can embrace it. Yeah, it's wild. You see a bit of that happening now as well. Like, you know, it's such a fascinating time. I'm interested to see where it goes. I think, like, in terms of England's heading into a civil war state. I can't see it going anywhere else. Surely things will just keep boiling, implode. Europe, it's an interesting time in Europe.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's like, is a political solution even going to solve the demographic replacement, you know?
Yeah. That's and a lot of people on the right, that's the kind of thing they're not saying. You don't see it much yet, but in private conversations, that's what they're saying. That democracy's failed.
Yeah.
That's clear. So it's like, okay, so we're not going to vote our way out of this. What's left?
Yeah.
There's no...
It'd be interesting to see what happens. And, you know, like at this point, I think everybody sees that the Great Replacement is not a conspiracy. Like, come on. Yeah. It's pretty obvious at this point. I mean, like, the funny thing is, like, if you said that was a thing, like 5 years ago, you'd be called a white supremacist. I don't think it makes you a white supremacist to admit it's clearly, come on, like from 30% of the global population, probably more actually, to 7%. come on now,
Yeah,
like this is clearly a thing. Like the Great Replacement is clearly a thing.
Yeah, and now what they're doing is like in Ireland and England is they're buying up, and you have to imagine this is mind-boggling. This is why I started. I remember being so frustrated because it just blew my mind that you would have the government buying up hotels. There was one point a third of all hotels in Ireland in the West was used to house asylum seekers. A third.
Wow.
That's like decimating tourism, decimating local businesses. So all of a sudden, like it was since I think 2021-ish, kind of mid-COVID times, all of a sudden there's a huge push to flood these countries. England had about 400 hotels, I think, bought up, or asylum centers, I don't know what you even call them, used to house these refugees, these illegals, and they're spending millions. In Ireland, so roughly it comes around 2 billion for accommodation. That doesn't include security or food or anything. So Nick Delahanty puts it at about, I think, 4 to 5 billion a year, which could be used for so much more to house illegals. It's insane. Same with the Netherlands, same with England. Scotland has the same. And you're thinking, what's going on all of a sudden? What is happening?
Yeah. I think the most radicalizing moment for me last time I was in Europe about 2 months ago, I was in Luxembourg City, so the capital of Luxembourg. And at night, like 90% of the people were Africans outside. Like some of them were prostitutes, some of them were selling drugs, some of them were just begging for money, others were just loitering. I was like, what the fuck? This is Luxembourg City. This is a tiny country. Most of the people that are in Luxembourg don't even live there. They commute there for work. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? A tiny little country. And it was very demoralizing because, like I said, when I'm going to Europe, I want to experience Europe. Like if I had the choice where they're like, all right, Patrick, you're half Asian, you can't live in Europe, but you can visit. The choice is you either get to live in Europe, but you also have to have all the Middle Easterners and Africans there, or you can visit once in a while and it's all European people. Of course, I'm going to pick just getting to visit and seeing all the European people, because like at this point, it's not the craziest thing that people will try to say is like, you'll ask them straight up, okay, if 100% of England's were replaced with like I don't know, Algerians or something, are they still England? And they want to say obviously not, but they can't say it. They can't say it because it's not like, they're not allowed to. Their brains aren't allowed to work for a second. So it's
like the magic soil theory. The second they step on this English soil, they become English. It's like, okay, guys.
Wait, but the Anglo-Saxons were black, Michael. Didn't you see the new documentary?
Cheddar man. Fuck's sake. Yeah, they do it. Oh, there's it's so miserable. It is demoralizing. And there is. I remember watching a Russian guy talk about it. You might have seen it too. Do you remember that YouTube clip with the Russian guy talks about demoralization?
Which Russian guy? Dugan?
It was a Dugan. I don't know.
Do you have a beard?
No beard.
No, okay.
But he talked about demoralization. And that's what's happening. It's trying to just say, it's just everything they throw at us is demoralizing. You have men wearing dresses. You have, obviously, there's a Swedish documentary. It might be Switzerland, Swedish, I think it is, where the first Swedes, and they're just black people walking in. And you're like,
I
guys,
saw that.
come on. You seen that? It's just, there was another one that came out a week ago, and it was set in the UK, and it was in the past anyways, but it showed a little wartime, and it was a black dude, and you're like, guys, back then it wasn't the case. Do you get me? It's just so, I don't know what it is. It's just, it is miserable. I find it.
Yeah.
It's depressing. It's depressing. Although
Maybe
I don't get too depressed by it. I find it. I like it. It's a challenge. I think this is in front of us. How are we going to overcome it? And I think we'll get there.
Yeah, we're at Tours right now. I said my spirit. The Battle of Tours, where the Moors, they were stopped by Charles Martel, I believe, in like 700s or whatever. Like they conquered most of Iberia, and they're coming north to try to take France, and they stop them at Tours. This is the moment, this is the Battle of Tours, circa 2025. But yeah, maybe it's a good place to sort of wrap that up. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Same, Patrick. That was good.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
Excellent. Me too. Hopefully I can. I'll see more YouTube videos on your channel soon. You got to start. You got to start the Irish podcast. You got to be the Irish podcaster.
Will you come on if I start?
Of course. Absolutely. I got you.
I'll have Nietzsche. I actually, while we were talking, I bought the 2 books.
Man, there we go.
Yeah. So we'll see how they go down. Should be interesting.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on. Like I said, we're I'm sending my support from America. Spiritual support.
That's your quarter bit Irish.
Yes, quarter on my dad's side.
Dad's side, yeah. See, you're connected.
Somewhere here.
Hey,
I have a green screen. Wait, let me try to. If I put my hand there, you'll see it. You see it in the background? Wait, shit, you can't really see it. I'm trying. I have a green screen on. That's why. It's there. Trust me, it's there. But for some reason, I have an Imperial Japanese flag.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, is that a Japanese flag?
I love Japan. They're so cool. The samurai. There's a Japanese guy behind me, Mikio Mishima. So that's one thing I'll say about the Filipinos is that they're very non-resentful people. They were colonized by the Spanish, Americans, occupied by the Japanese. You'll never find a single Filipino in the Philippines with hatred,
Yeah. Filipinos are some of the nicest. It's probably genetics too, somehow, or culture. I don't know. But they're some of the nicest people. I have a Filipino friend who's lovely. Absolutely lovely. Yeah. Really nice girl.
Yeah. Hey, it's like it comes down to resentfulness and hatred, all this badness is coming from that hatred. So I'm not going to be lame and say we need more love in the world, but we need less hatred. We need a good balance. Hate when necessary, love when necessary, peace when necessary, war when necessary.
Maximize maximum hate, maximum love.
There we go. Yeah. That's what I think. That's what I think. That's what the Nietzschean project is. I think. Just everything. Maximal life. Yeah. There we go. But anyway, any final words for my legionaries?
Not really. Just what's your demographics like? Are they based in America or more so European?
Most are in America. I have a lot of fans in Europe. Some in Australia. I'm sure I have a few Filipino fans because they love to see. They love to support there. I have this one guy. He's half. I'm gonna have him on my show soon. He's half Icelandic, half Filipino. This guy's like 6'2", super jacked, and he's like he goes to all the rallies and stuff and all that stuff. So I got fans everywhere, but mainly the United States. But yeah,
that's good. Yeah, if they want to keep in touch with the European side stuff, follow me on Instagram.
Good. I'll link your Instagram, your Twitter, and then I'll link your YouTube as well.
Appreciate it, Patrick.
Down in the description. So
right there.
Go follow. Show your support. If Elon Musk is listening, I'm sorry, Elon. I didn't say anything negative. Send me money.
He didn't mean it. He didn't mean it. Oh, what were you? What were you? 55% approval rate, was it?
Yeah, it's 100 now. 100%. Those are rookie numbers. Let's get those numbers up, right? And then to Netanyahu, if you send me, if you send me like $1 trillion and Padme Amidala from Attack of the Clones clone, then I will stop talking negatively about all that stuff. I promise. You just got to send me my shekels. No, I'm kidding. Never.
As if you don't have a direct line to him. This guy.
Shut it down. Shut it down. No, but my closing words will be to the Irish legionaries, because I know there's a few of them there, is keep up the good fight. Never surrender. Remember your history. You fought against British occupation for 800 years, a much more powerful entity than the people that you're fighting against now. Now you are fighting against the EU, which is also very difficult, but you fought against the strongest empire, the most powerful empire in the history, and won your independence. And before that, you fought off Viking raids, you fought off each other, a true warrior people. So you cannot slacken in your resolve. Keep fighting, Keep up the good struggle, and we're in your corner here. You know, like I always say. Well, I didn't always say this, but I told Uber the last podcast I did with him. My grandpa would send money to the IRA, I think, or something. I don't know. Back in the day. So, you know, I send my support. My quarter Irish. You know,
yeah, America and Ireland are very, you know, they're like brother and sister almost.
Absolutely. Hey, America's helping Ireland today, apparently, with the
speech.
Get rid of speech censorship. So we're in your corner. Again, thanks for coming on, and to the Legionaries, stay tuned. Big things coming. Got a lot of good interviews coming up. But as always, this is the Warrior Philosopher, building the foundations of the Warrior Philosophy. Ave Nova Roma. We'll see you next time.
Best of luck.